I declare this meeting of the Howell Township Zoning Board to be open, adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on December 6, 2019, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Tri-Town News. Second, on December 6, 2019, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on December 6, 2019, said notice was posted in the office of the Zoning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. And on May 4th, 2020, a notice was sent to the Asbury Park Press and the Star Ledger that this would be a remote meeting held by communications equipment. Please take note that this meeting is also being videotaped as well as being live streamed for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77. This meeting is a judicial proceeding, and any questions or comments must be limited to the issues of what the board may legally consider in reaching their decision, and the decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Before we go any further, just to keep some housekeeping, because this is a remote meeting and we don't want any background noise, we will control muting everyone from here. So please don't touch your speakers on your end. We'll leave the board attorney unmuted along with whoever's presenting and their attorney. And as each presenter is done, we will open up the meeting for questions from the board professionals and the board members. After the entire case has been presented, we'll have the chairman open the hearing up for members of the public to ask questions or comments on the application.
Just keep in mind that this program works pretty well, but there is a few second delay when we turn the muting on and off. So when we come time for board questions, just give us a minute. We're going to unmute everybody, and then we'll let you know when it's good to proceed. There is a raise your hand feature. If you click on your screen, a small menu will pop up. If you have a question, you can raise your hand. When the time's right, we'll look at that and we'll call on anybody. But especially the board members, the professionals, they'll all have their opportunity to speak. Just we'll let you know when we're muting and unmuting. As far as the public, there will be a public comment period. Same thing. The public will be muted until the very end. When that is opened up, we will give plenty of time because there is a delay on YouTube for that person to either log in, call in, or have their opportunity to be heard. And we'll unmute everybody at that time too.
Okay?
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are right now, Wendell.
Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, you may. Hold on, we have to unmute everyone.
First time.
No oigo, por favor.
We're good. You can go ahead. I'll go ahead with the roll call. Matt Hughes.
Here.
Richard Mertens. James Moretti.
Here.
Tom O'Donnell.
Here.
Jose Orozco.
Here.
Paul Saya.
Present.
Glenn Cantor.
Here.
Matthew Gonzalez.
Here.
And Chairman Nansen.
Here.
You have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, it's kind of hard to do this without a flag, but could everybody please stand and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Yeah. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
and justice
with
for all.
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Amen.
Now, if you would, can everybody take just a moment and reflect on what's going on in our country and the world today? And just in your own way, have your prayer for guidance and where we come out of this on the other end, please.
No, Sherry's still on there. Sherry, she was on there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tropper, you mind swearing in the professional?
Very good. Well, Mr. Chair, Curley, Jen, and Sherry, would you please raise your right hand? You swear the testimony you will give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
And I should also indicate that tonight we have Mr. Howard, who has been sworn, Sherry, Spiro, Jen Dean, and Charlie Conley, all sworn to the evening, Mr. Chair.
Come over there.
I'm sorry, Wendell, did you say something?
Is Jennifer there?
Yes,
I didn't
Jennifer.
hear her name. Okay,
She's here.
good. Approval of minutes.
We have no minutes this evening.
Uh-oh. I just got a blank screen.
There you go.
Good.
No minute vouchers.
Yes, there's one voucher that I emailed to all the members the other day, and we can either take care of it now or at the end of the meeting,
Let's take care of it now.
okay?
We're here. Did everybody have an opportunity to review the voucher from Mr. Tropoli?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Can I have a motion to approve that voucher?
Mr. Chair.
Motion by Mr. Hughes, do I have a second?
I have a motion by Mr. Hughes. Who was the second?
Jose,
Do
we're
I have
getting a
a
lot of
second?
noise on your line, Jose.
Yeah, Jose is the.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Moretti.
We're ready? Thank you.
We have all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Voucher approved.
Thank you.
Comments?
I have no correspondence, although I did send, I sent everyone an email this evening with a letter from Wawa from a case from back in '01 regarding their groundwater monitoring, so everybody can just read that. It's just that they can't get on the site to monitor because of COVID-19, and they'll continue later on. So that was all sent to the email, and that's all I have.
That's the Wawa on, Howell Road, correct?
Yes. Yes.
I think
33
so,
and- Okay,
5 points.
33, right.
and that's all I have.
okay, resolutions?
I have no resolutions.
Okay, Mr. Alfieri,
Hang on, I'm gonna start muting some board members. Mr. Chairman, you're gonna stay off, Sal Fury will be off, and we'll keep Ron Tropoli off.
okay,
Mr. Chair, you hear me?
yes, sir.
Hi.
Mr. Alfieri, I would like your permission to move the last two cases of the agenda ahead of you. I think we can dispose of these fairly quickly. And
That's
get-
fine, I
get them-
understand. I understand, and that's fine.
Okay. Ms.
Thank you.
Tropley will move forward with the last two cases on the agenda.
That's right.
Okay,
Would you read them into the record, Mr. Chair?
yes, sir, I sure will. Case number BA 1811A, Keystone Novelties Distributors LLC, temporary use permit. Application of Keystone Novelties Distributors LLC, applicant and Charles Anderson, Howell Lane, as owner seeking a temporary use permit for a tent on the property for retail sales of New Jersey legal sparkling devices from 6/22/20 to 7/5/20, and 6/21/21 to 7/5/21, from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily on premises known as Block 137, Lot 5301, 1002 U.S. Highway 9 South.
Mr. Middleton, we've unmuted you, so you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you, members of the board. Jack May, I believe, is on the line.
Yes, he's
Is the
unmuted as
applicant-
well.
So, just preliminarily, if the board recalls, 2 years ago, my client appeared before the board for a temporary tent permit for the Howell Lanes Park, ostensibly to use the fireworks from New Jersey law. The application was approved. As I understand it, it was a 2-year permit, which brought us back before the board tonight, essentially to renew that permit. As a second site on 1175 Route 8. So, and that is not here before the board prior to the evening. So, he's seeking a similar approval that he obtained 2 years ago. So, with that being said, and not to belabor the matter,
Mr. Middleton, has anything changed from last year?
No, nothing changed at the Howell Lanes property whatsoever.
Okay. Professor Farley, do you have anything to add to this?
I'm sorry, Wendell, we didn't catch that.
Charlie, do you have any additional testimony?
Yeah, so, Mr. Chairman, obviously, like Mr. Middleton said, they were here in 2018. They got approval, a 2-year temporary use permit to operate the sale of fireworks, sparklers, I should say, sparklers and novelties, from the period of June 22nd, 2018 to July 6, 2018, and then also June 21st, 2019 to July 6, 2019. What they're here this time around is to extend that temporary 2-year use permit. This would be their final of a 2-year extension. In their application submittal, they requested for a 3-year period. I just want to make it clear the maximum that the board can recommend to the governing body is 2 years at this time. And then just to clarify the board, the board isn't actually authorized to issue the temporary use permit. We're recommending authorization to the governing body, who then issues the temporary use permit. Basically, Mr. Middleton, is it your applicant's testimony, there's no change in the use from the prior resolution of approval issued by the governing body, resolution R-18-155, no change to the signage, no change to the sales, no change to the operation, size of the tent, anything like that?
Correct. Is that correct, Mac?
Yes, that's correct.
If,
Okay.
let me put this up.
Okay.
Tim, before we go on, the other gentleman that just answered, I would need to swear him in.
Right.
I can't see him, so I will, after I swear him in, we'll get his name, and I'm going to ask him to affirm or swear that he had his hand up when I swear him in. So can you give us the name of that witness, please?
Jack May.
I'm sorry, you broke up a bit? What was that again?
John F. May, M-A-Y.
John May. Mr. May, would you please raise your right hand and take an oath? You swear the testimony you'll give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, correct, sir?
I
So
do.
help you God. And you also swear or affirm that your hand was raised during the oath. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, your witness, Mr. Middleton.
Okay, you've heard the questions raised by Mr. Cunliffe. Just explain to the board there's been no change at the site, correct?
Correct. There have been no changes. The layout that was posted just briefly ago was a layout that the board requested us to have in terms of where the tent's placed, where the generator's placed, where the porta potty is placed, and we have operated consistent with that layout for the past 2 years. And it's my understanding without incident at all. It's gone very smoothly. We have a good working relationship with the landlord. We have local folks that run the operations, actually employee of Howell Lanes. So we respectfully asked originally we asked for a 3-year extension. Understand that may not be compliant with the nature of the temporary use permit, and if 2-year additional use is more appropriate, that certainly works for us.
So, and then, Mr. Middleton, just to clarify, do you have a copy of the Fire Bureau's review memo dated May 5th, 2020? If
Well,
you-
I have your review, but I'm not quite sure if I got that.
Okay, so basically, the Fire Bureau pretty much said they did not have any significant issue with the layout. It's the same as was previously proposed, provided the applicant, complies with all laws and guidelines, state and at the municipal level. Just want to make sure the electric generator that you guys are going to have on the site, that's not going to operate beyond any of the hours that you stated for operation.
The generator is used to power 2 lights underneath the tent. It's not exposed to outside the tent at all, and it's just to give a little bit of light during the dusk period for shoppers that are inside the tent.
Okay, so it'll be from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and then 11 p.m. on those select days, July 3rd and July 4th.
Correct.
Okay. And then they had a comment about no additional storage containers on the site. You guys agree to that?
Yes.
Okay. And then they also had a comment about obviously making sure that you guys provide 24-hour security on site. Personnel must be awake. And then obviously they noted that a Type 2 permit would be required for the Fire Bureau. You have no issue with that?
No, that's what we do throughout the state.
Mr. Chairman, that's all I have for Mr. Middleton and Mr. May.
Okay, Ms. Beam, do you have anything?
I do not.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, really quick, this is Matt Howard. Since I'm not on the video, I'll just,
Here,
Yeah.
you can be on the video.
no, it's okay, I'm good. The applicant has done this 2 years in the past, so they've pulled all the necessary permits the last 2 summers. We've had no complaints, we've had no issues. Really, after they pulled permits, we haven't heard anything about them. So that's just for the board's knowledge that this hasn't been an issue for us at the town.
Okay. Thank you, sir. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, Matt Hughes, I'd like to make a motion to approve this application.
It's not an application, it's just for a temporary permit.
Recommendation, Matt.
Correct, I'm sorry, yeah, for the permits, correct.
Hold on 1 second. We need to unmute all the board members.
Okay.
We ready?
Yep. I have a motion by Mr. Hughes. Do I have a second?
I'll second that based upon the information from prior years, and we had no problems or complaints with the site in the past. And I think this temporary permit is okay and should go forward.
Okay. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, you may. Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Mertens. Mr. Moretti.
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Yes.
Mr. Orozco.
Yes.
Mr. Saya.
Yes.
Chairman Nansen.
Yes,
Motion carries. Thank you.
thank you.
With the
Okay,
exception of the
case number
chairman,
BO 20-105, Keystone Novelties Distributors LLC. Temporary use permit. Application of Keystone Novelties Distributors LLC is applicant in 1175 Route 33 LLC. Felix Brulowski, I hope I didn't mess that up, as owner seeking a temporary use permit for a tent on the property for retail sales of New Jersey legal sparkling devices. from 6/22/20 to
2105.
7/5/20 to 6/21/21 to 7/5/21, from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily on premises known as Block 183, Lot 77, and 77.01, 1175 Route 33. Welcome,
Unfortunately, I didn't
Mr.
turn that,
Middleton.
sorry. Is Mr. Middleton unmuted?
I'm here. I got bounced. I just got back on. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Middleton, do you have a witness that you want to swear in for this one?
Yes, it would be Mr. Middleton again.
Okay,
Mr. Copley, you want to swear him in again?
yes. Mr. Mayor, would you please raise your right hand? You swear that the testimony you'll give this evening, the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the true self you got.
I do.
And again, sir, you affirm that your right hand was raised during the administration of the oath, correct?
Yes, it was.
Your witness, Mr. Middleton.
Assuming you're seeking another temporary use permit for a tent at a separate site, correct?
Correct.
And as I understand it, it's 1175 Route 33?
Yes.
Can you just briefly, because this is a site, please describe the layout for the board? I believe there's a map that just put up on the screen.
Yes. Tim, you broke up a little bit. You're asking me to just describe our intention.
Just please describe this for the board, is correct.
Yes, this is correct. Our intention, the application is a request to place the tent where you see it on this diagram, which is about 400 feet from a bulk fuel storage. The generator is placed about 20 feet from the tent, and we're about 25 feet from that building. All of these placements are consistent with NFPA 1124, which is the guidelines written into the New Jersey state law, which directs how we should be compliant with an operation like this of the sale of sparklers.
Mr. Middleton,
Yes.
before you move forward, I just want to explain to the board members, this is at Colts Neck Road and Route 33. The Petroleum 19 gas station on the plan that you're looking at right now is the building right there on the left. The farm stand is the building in the middle, and the tent is in the field that's to the right of that farm stand.
Correct.
So all of y'all that are familiar with the site, you know, it's a pretty considerable distance from Petroleum 19.
Correct.
Okay.
You just read my mind because I would back my client to that point, but correct. I gave us 4 feet. So Jack, that's the layout. Are you going to operate under the same criteria that you operated at the bowling alley?
Yes, our training,
employees.
our training, our guidelines, the tent layout, where we place fire extinguishers, the regional, the local manager, all of our operations are managed in the exact same way. It's almost like a franchise. So the experience that the township had with Howell applies directly to here as well. We operate in much the same way, and actually every product is placed on each of the tables exactly the same way.
Okay, Mr. Cullen had issued a review letter. I don't know detail. Do you want me to get into it? With some questions you raised on page that we could address if need be.
So, Mr. Chairman, I can hit on the big items real quick, if that's feasible.
Absolutely. Just hit on it.
So I just want to note it's a slightly larger tent than what's being proposed at the Howell Lanes. It's 30 by 50 here, where it's 20 by 40. Is there going to be any additional signage, Mr. May, or is it going to be the same makeup of signage as you have over at the Howell Bowling Lanes?
It's the same signage.
Same signage, okay. Is the intent to operate concurrently at both sites, or is this just an alternate site location?
Our intention is to operate concurrently. We feel like it's different traffic patterns, and both locations will draw from a different group of shoppers.
And you would anticipate that some of the usage over at the other site would then shift here and kind of alleviate any traffic impact on that site?
Possibly, but our goal is not to cannibalize one location versus another, but grow incrementally as a result of adding the second location.
Okay, I just have a question regarding the two lots. So it appears to me that the tent and everything to sell the sprinklers is on lot 77. I'm just confused why the application is for the lot on the corner. Are you anticipating to use some of the parking from the fueling station for this site, restrooms, or what's the purpose of that?
The landlord with whom we signed the agreement owns both properties, and when I did the original sketch, I felt like the tent placement was pretty close to the property line, so as not to be of a concern for the township. I referenced both properties, and again, there's the same owner for both properties.
Okay, so there's a potential that you may utilize some of the parking if need be, or is it all to be utilized on the farm stand site?
No, the intention is potentially to use both lots, both properties.
Okay, and then as far as for the farm stand property, how is that going to be organized and maintained? Obviously, one of the concerns with the Fire Bureau is making sure that they still have access in the event of any type of emergency. How are you guys going to dictate that on lot 77?
Well, it's the same owner, and we talked with the owner today, and he does have intentions of leasing that space out for a small, flower kind of farm operation inside that building. But our intention is, as indicated in the diagram, to have substantial distance between the building and where the tent is. So, our intention is for our shoppers to park in front of the tent.
Okay, so would it be your testimony that you'll make sure that you maintain a 30-foot circulation aisle, from the both site entrances, so if fire needs to, they can access the site?
Yes.
Okay. And then obviously, like you said, you're 400 foot from any fueling tanks on Howell Petroleum. So that'll be maintained, and you're going to obviously comply to all the other recommendations of the Fire Bureau as far as 24-hour security a week, get all necessary state and municipal permits. The tent's going to be flame retardant, and then obviously you're compliant with all state regulations. It's just going to be sparklers and novelties, no explosives or projectiles or anything of that nature, right?
That's correct.
Correct.
I think that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Actually, one more thing. Obviously, I think the farm stand might have had some approvals from the County Ag Board. Matt might be able to elaborate more on that. I would just say if any site plan approval from the Ag Board impact the layout of what the applicant's proposing, in subsequent years, that they be required to either come back to the board or the governing body to make any amendments to their temporary use permit. Should it change the, character of the application, in a significant way.
Okay.
The board.
Charlie?
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
I would like to know, is it possible that we could request them not to use the Petroleum 19 parking area, but try to continue, because if they open that farm stand, you're gonna have people walking across the parking lot from Petroleum 19 to get to their stand. And I don't think, as far as safety, I don't think that would be a wise thing.
I agree.
That's a valid point. I think, if the applicant would agree to it, I think, it's a large gravel area on, lot 77. I would just think that they would have to maybe put up some temporary cones or drums or, parking signage just to delineate where the parking area is, so it's not haphazardly throughout the gravel area. And I would think, they could, obviously comply with any requirements of the fire bureau and the police department to that end.
Okay. Mr. Middleton, do you have a problem with that?
No, we don't.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Is there any from any of the professionals?
No, sir.
Nope.
No, sir.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the board?
I have my hand up. Could I ask a question?
Yes, sir. You may ask a question, Mr. Moretti.
Maybe it was mentioned, and being so far away, I didn't hear it. But what about the COVID-19 requirements if it does go, if Governor Murphy does extend it into July? And can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, obviously,
Oh, gosh.
sounds like,
Having construction?
If the COVID-19 is extended into July, when this is going to be going full board, did they make requirements for distancing and so forth? I may have been mentioned and I didn't hear it, sorry.
we'd obviously have to comply with the governor's order in effect at the time, whatever that be. I believe, Mr. May, I believe you already have thought about this.
Yes.
And you set the operation with COVID-19.
Yes. We're prepared. There's an enormous amount of
Does
background
anybody know
noise.
who's cutting down the tree in the background?
Yeah,
I thought
We
Mr.
are-
Hart was using fireworks.
Oh, maybe that's what it was. Fireworks.
Fireworks.
I like that one. So we are prepared to operate compliant with the COVID-19 requirements in place at the time. What we are prepared for at this point, and we're ready to execute based on what we know now, is there will be a sign at the main entrance directing customers to maintain 6 foot separation. Our clerks will have masks. We will have hand sanitizer at every retail location. We have capacity limitation guidelines based on the size of the tent, and assuming a 15 square foot radius around every shopper, based on, again, the size of the tent. Given our history of operation and the number of sales and the number of customers that are inside a tent under normal circumstances, our ability to meet a capacity limitation of no less than 15 square feet per shopper is not a problem.
Excuse me, Wendell, would that have any effect with that market on this, next to it? Suppose those people start getting overcrowded and the two start mixing together.
well, the issue is gonna be, is they're gonna have to be self-policing. So they're
Okay.
gonna have somebody there, people have to take responsibility. And, you know, we can't be a police state anymore, you know, people have to take their own responsibility. And I think, you know, if they're aware of it and the governor has in motion certain restrictions, they're gonna have to abide by it, period.
Okay, no problem. I was just addressing it, just, you know, just to put it on the record, just so to cover ourselves, that's all.
Great. What's the pleasure of the board?
I think, Paul Sand, you have your hand up as well?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Just making sure the system works, but Mr. Nansen, Charlie, Mr. Moretti, you know, I share similar concerns. We don't want the site to turn into a haphazard manner. We don't want, you know, flammables from patrons who are smoking cigars and walking back and forth from the cross. And the fact that there is no, like, to believe they need the, you know, automobile/vehicle control in and out of the property when we're operating in this manner.
She's open.
Over.
Any other, from any of the board members?
Yes, sir.
What's the pleasure of the board on this?
I make a recommendation that this be passed on to the council. If all the requirements that have been laid forth are met with no exception, everything that Charlie has mentioned and reviewed, and our other, what do you call, professionals have made their recommendations, and I think this should be moved forward to the council.
Do I have a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded by Mr. Merton.
Roll call?
You want to just do all in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Hearing none, motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, members of the board. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
how's everybody? Everybody, you know, y'all need to take a 5-minute little break, or we ready to move forward?
Okay.
5-minute break's good.
Matt, we're gonna take a 5-minute break?
All right,
Okay.
I'm gonna mute everybody, and we'll come back at,
8:15.
Okay.
The zoning board's taking a short recess. Mr. Chairman, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the zoning board will now reconvene, and before we get started, I would just like to remind any members of the public that may be listening to this meeting that you will have an opportunity to ask questions and comments on the applications at the end of the presentation when the chairman opens the hearing up for members of the public. Thank you.
Also, I would like to add to the board members, I would like for you to please get a notepad, hold your questions till after each one of the applicants' professional, their testimony is given. Then I'll go down, we'll roll call each one of the board members for their questions of that witness at that time. Is that okay?
They're all
Everybody
unmuted,
just
so.
raise your hand if you understood that. Okay. Mr. Martin, did you understand that? Just raise your hand. Okay, everybody understand, okay, good. Okay,
And just one more thing before we start, Wendell. Mr. Alfieri, I added one more exhibit to your exhibit list for Bennett Road. It's A25, which is your proof of service that was submitted, which is in order. Okay? Is he unmuted? Okay. No, Bennett Road. I'm done, Chairman.
Eileen, I have one other question. How do we handle the signing of the exhibits?
I spoke to Attorney Tropoli, and he assured me that I was allowed to sign them for now.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. It's the easiest thing.
Okay, that's all I wanted to find out.
And
Okay,
and
well,
also, one other item, both Mr. Saya and Chairman Nansen have watched the videos, excuse me,
It was
Mr.
audio.
Saya watched it for Bennett Road, so he is eligible to vote, and sent me an email which will act as his certification until I see him and he can sign one. And on K10, both Mr. Saya and Chairman Nansen are eligible to vote, and again have sent me emails and will sign certifications when we come back to regular meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, application before the board, case number BA 1409 A2, Bennett Road Associates. Amended preliminary and final major site plan. Application of Bennett Road Associates is applicant and owner seeking amended preliminary and final major site plan approval to add 37 parking stalls on the west of the existing one-story building, removal of 7,450 square feet from the rear of the existing one-story building, relocate trailers, dumpsters, and construction of a 9,600 square foot shop building in the northwest corner of the property, and stormwater management measures for the increase in the impervious area premises known as Block 168, Lot 26, 210 Bennett Road. This application was originally scheduled for October 7th, 2019, and it was carried to December 9th, 2019, with no further notice. After testimony on December 9th, 2019, the application was adjourned and carried to January 27th, 2020, with no further notice. Got it.
Getting a little bit of feedback, hang on.
Okay, on January 27, 2020, the application was carried to February 24th, 2020, with no further notice. And on February 24th, it was carried to April 13th, 2020, with no further notice. On April 13th, this application was carried to May 18th, 2020. Expiration date, June 30th, 2020. Eligible voters, Hughes, Mertens, Moretti, O'Donnell, Orozco, Cantor, Nansen, and now Mr. Saya.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir, Mr. Sal.
since Mr. Moretti's already heard the case on December 9th, I'd be happy to just be the lone wolf here and, as a bystander, and let him vote on the application in full.
Okay, well, you're a full member.
Mr. Moretti is a full member as well. It's Mr. Cantor would be your alternate.
Yeah, Mr. Cantor would be the alternate.
Did Mr. Cantor attend the December 9th meeting?
Yes.
I think he would be better suited then, because I didn't get to see all the exhibits and everything.
Well, if you're indicating, Mr. Saya, that you're not completely up to speed and have not looked at the exhibits, I mean, it's a little unusual because you are here tonight, but I think under the circumstances, if you haven't had the opportunity to look at everything, and in fact you're uncomfortable, I don't think Mr. Alfieri will raise any procedural objection to that. Is that correct, Mr. Alfieri?
No objection.
Okay. So Mr. Cantor then will sit this evening on this application.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. I'm grateful, only because it's, if I were at the dais, I would be looking at the drawings and the plans and everything else and talking to the professionals, but, that has not happened. So, like I said, I think Mr. Cantor is best off to vote on this one.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Alfieri, I know you have witnesses. Why don't we do one at a time and we'll just move forward that way? Mr. Tropoli is swear. I know most of them have probably already been sworn, but let's re-swear them via this way, tonight, so.
Mr. Chair, I know that, looking at my notes from December 9th, the only witness that was sworn, who I believe is on tonight, was Mr. Mullen, correct, Sal?
Yes, that's correct.
Who do you intend on presenting tonight? In addition?
Brian Murphy from FWH.
Okay, and that'll be the extent?
That's it.
Okay, and I believe I saw Mr. Murphy somewhere. Mr. Murphy, are you here, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Sir, would you raise your right hand? You swear that the testimony you'll take this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, to help you God?
I do.
And again, sir, for the record, you do affirm and swear that your hand was raised during the administration of the oath, correct?
Yes.
Very good, Sal. You're a witness.
Thank you.
Sal, Sal,
Yes.
I would like to have him qualified real quick, just a brief, quick qualification.
Sure.
I know Mr. Murphy and, but for the record, just have him qualified, please.
Sure, not a problem. I'm a licensed professional engineer and planner in the state of New Jersey. I've been practicing engineering since 1997. I've appeared before this board numerous times, as well as the planning board and zoning board in town, and probably about 80 boards throughout the state.
We accept your credentials, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Matt and Eileen, Mr. Mullen is on the screen, but he could not hear off the screen, so he is called in as well. I don't know if you have to let.
He's going to have to go off one. We're getting feedback from him because he's actually on both.
Yeah, Tom is giving us a lot of feedback, so there's two sound sources coming from him.
I see. So, Tom, can you hear us on the screen? Otherwise, you can just call in and get rid of the video.
He could mute the screen.
Can he? All right.
He's got to turn the volume all the way off of something. I'll try and unmute him again. Tom, can you hear us?
Yes.
Can you turn off the mic on your screen?
Yeah, I don't have any,
Tom, do you only have one device or do you have two devices?
that better?
That's better.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, so,
Working
Mr.
out.
You testified in December, and you also testified in support of the original application, and then there was an interim application in December, in 2018 as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're a principal of both the real property owner and the business that's operated on the site. That's so correct?
That is correct.
Before we get into a description of your business, I mentioned the 2018 approval, which was a wet out approval that you requested that the board grant to you, and it was in fact granted. At the last meeting, the board members questioned whether you were going to continue to potentially implement that approval or abandon it, and you have agreed now to abandon that approval. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And in fact, you never even implemented any portion of it on site. Is that also correct?
That's also correct.
Okay. So, Mr. Tropoli, if the approval is granted tonight, the applicant would stipulate abandonment of the 2018 wet out approval.
So noted. I'm very familiar with it. I wrote the rest up, so it's not a problem.
So, Tom, again, just for some of the board members who may not have been around or don't recall the prior application, could you generally describe the nature of your business?
Yes. NAP is a cleaning and televising inspection service for sewer pipes and any other kind of pipes that are in the ground. We also provide rehabilitation services, which are done trenchlessly, which is about 90% of our business, and there's about 10% that we do, which is open excavation repairs to those sewer pipes.
And that work is done off-site, is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, you've had some success in your business since your original approval, and it has expanded. Would you describe for the board what you're currently proposing with this application?
Yes, from the original approval, when I came in front of the board, we had about 17 employees. And since then, we've grown to about 55 employees. So our service area is increased, but our structure of hours of operation are still the same. Our deliveries are pretty much still the same to the actual property location. And most of our work, like was stated before, is on-site as far as different locations throughout the state.
And when you say on-site, you mean on the work sites, not on this location?
That is correct.
So how many employees actually work at this property on a daily basis?
So we have a total at the facility of 20 people, which are comprised of 5 maintenance people, and we have, and the other is administrative, which perform obviously administrative duties, and managers that work between the field and the office. So the managers, which account for about 7 of those people, usually come in the mornings, and they're gone most of the day, and maybe sometimes come back. And with this COVID pandemic, we've been all trying to actually telework. So it's been quite a challenge, as everybody knows.
So out of the 20 employees that work on site, you have 8 administrative employees? Is that right?
That's correct.
5 maintenance, and then 7 people who are either on or off site as managers, is that correct?
That is correct.
The balance of your employees are work at the job sites.
Yes, they work at the job sites.
There are occasions, however, when you have training on site that you would bring more of your employees on site. Can you describe that?
Yes, probably about 3 times a year. It's usually every quarter. We do a safety training with OSHA training. We have health training with first aid. So we have that going on. And we also have traffic safety training. And some educational things that we, have for the employees. But like I said, they're about 3 times a year that when the entire company is actually on the property.
Now, in terms of daily or regular visitors, do you have customers or clients that come to your facility?
Yes, we have no walk-in visitors per se. We actually have signs out front. No solicitors, no salesmen. So it's by appointment only. And obviously with the pandemic going on, it's absolute zero. We right now don't have anybody allowed on the property without permission, except for, Federal Express and, certain deliveries of materials.
Now, speaking of deliveries, how frequently do you get deliveries, and what types of vehicles make those deliveries?
They're usually Federal Express box trucks type, box trucks, and they're usually probably about twice a day.
And no other types of deliveries for tractor trailers?
No, it's usually those type of deliveries throughout the day, and there's sporadic materials, maybe 2-3 times a week when we're very busy, but usually the norm is just Federal Express deliveries.
The architectural plan for the proposed building does not meet the current ordinance standards. And you took 2 photographs of your property from the front view from the street, which, Eileen, those are the 2 photographs we sent over?
Yes, hold on one second. No, go to exhibits.
We're gonna go one at a time. Sal, just let me know when you want to switch.
Okay, sure.
And can we just describe
So,
them and we'll mark them into evidence?
Right.
Yeah. So Tom, before we refer to either of the photographs, can you first tell the board approximately when the photographs were taken and by whom they were taken?
Yes, they were taken out at Bennett Road, standing in the front entrance, looking into the property.
And by you?
Yes.
And when, recently?
Probably about 3 weeks ago.
All right, and these photographs accurately depict the current condition of the property, and that view is the same, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this first photograph, which I guess we're gonna mark as B44?
No, A26.
I'm sorry, A26.
Right.
I know.
Can you describe for the board what this depicts?
Can you change that?
Yes, so this is looking into the property, standing out on Bennett Road, towards the building that's going to be constructed in the area where the trees are in the very back. It's a little hard to see, but there's you can't really see our facility from the existing facility from this view.
You want the second picture up?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this is to the other side of the driveway, standing still out on Bennett Road. You can see our existing building in the very, very back. It's a gray building. Kind of blends in with the sky back there, but it is back there. It's about 800 to 1,000 feet back.
Sal, I marked that as A27.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Tom, the reason you're asking for relief on the building is that it's far back from the road, very little visibility from the road, and it's not inconsistent with your existing building?
That's correct. The new proposed building is actually further back behind the building that you see there, and more to the westerly side of the property.
Okay. In terms of a loading zone, what are you proposing on site, and how will it operate?
The loading zone, I was a little confused of where that was shown, but the loading zone, I guess we're talking about loading zone to that building would be in the doors that are in front of the building, which are garage doors.
Then there's no separate loading zone for the building. It would just be that the truck would pull up to the garage door.
That is correct.
Sal, would you like the site plan or the architecturals up?
Tom, which is better for you, site plan or architectural?
The site plan would be good. So where it says the doors, which are on the east side and the west side of that building, would be the loading, which is where the entrance of the vehicles will go in and out.
And how about waste storage and dumpster locations? Another comment from the board planner was a more attractive enclosure for the dumpster area. Would you describe for the board generally where the dumpster is located? And Brian would get into that in more detail, but what happens, what's stored in the dumpster area, and how many dumpsters are there?
The dumpster pad is located, would be to the north a little bit more of the new building, which has a proposed 6-foot high board-on-board fence around it. And that would be a concrete pad with, well, actually, a stone dumpster pad with, clean stone underneath it.
And what
And
is,
there's usually about 2 dumpsters there, one for regular garbage and one for metal.
there's also a comment about trailers being located on site. What are those, what trailers are located on site, and what's the purpose?
So there's some storage trailers on site of the refrigerator trailers that are used to house the liner that we put in and install in the pipelines, which were previously addressed in the prior approval for the wet out. But since we are not doing the wet out anymore as far as actually wetting out the liner on site, they're just there for storage when we buy the material or have leftover material from our supplier.
And how many are on site?
There's typically 2. And those also do go out to the job sites once in a while as well. They're not permanent. They're completely mobile.
In terms of site lighting, what do you currently have on site, and what are you proposing, if anything, to add to the site?
We're proposing to do some site lighting in the parking stall area, which is to the west side of the existing building, for the employees, during the fall time and the winter time where it does get dark at 5 o'clock. It's a little hard to see out there when you're entering your car. And I believe there's going to be some proposed lighting around the actual building on the new proposed building.
And just to remind the board, you testified to this earlier, the hours of operation that were originally approved are Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m., and that's not changing, is that correct?
That is correct.
There's also a reference to potential location for racks or rack storage area. Is that something we're proposing?
Yes, those racks are actually on site now, and they typically just store PVC pipe for repairs, ductile iron pipes, just all different sizes, and they're stacked on those pipe racks vertically, and they're about 15 feet high. There's 2 of them.
All right, now let's get back to deliveries. You mentioned well, first of
So,
all,
can I just interrupt for a minute?
yes.
I am very much struggling because you have a site plan up, there's 8 million things shown on it, and we're just randomly referencing things. I have when you started talking about loading, I was done. I have absolutely no idea what you've talked about since you talked about the loading zone at all.
So
It's very difficult for me to understand what you're talking about when you're not really, Matt can't show me what you're referencing because you're not telling him. I literally, once you started talking about loading, that was it. I have no idea where the loading zone is. I have no idea about the rest of anything you said after that. Nothing.
So maybe, Tom, would it be best if we start on the left side of the plan and just work our way through to the right?
I mean, I guess my overall question is why you're not just having Brian Murphy give this testimony?
Well, Brian will. Brian's going to give it in more detail. I just wanted him to explain from an operational aspect what's happening. But definitely Brian's going to go through the same points. So if you want...
I mean, like, what you referenced with the loading, when I'm looking at it, it looks like parking spaces. So I literally have no idea what you're talking about at all.
So if you want to hold that line of questioning until Brian testifies, we could do that, and then Tom obviously can answer questions when you're ready. But that's all I have for Mr. Mullen, Mr. Chair.
Can you tell me again what the hours are? Because I didn't even get that.
7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday.
So I have a couple questions for Mr. Mullen to clarify too. So when he says there's 5 maintenance employees, can you provide some testimony as to what type of maintenance activities? Is it like cleaning of the facilities, or is this maintenance of vehicles and equipment? What does that entail?
Yes, it's light maintenance of equipment and vehicles.
And where does that take place?
It takes place in the existing building right now, and we're looking to move that to this new proposed building.
So are we talking oil changes, hydraulics and things like that, or changing tires and stuff like that?
Changing tires, oils, light repairs, electrical repairs, blinkers, headlights,
So as far as
just basic maintenance.
So as far as fluids and, hydraulic fluids, oils, that's all collected and disposed off-site in accordance with, any regulations, state regulations?
That is correct. We have a company that provides that service.
Okay. And then as far as, the pipe rack areas, you got a 50 by 30 foot pipe rack area on grass. It's southeast of your proposed shop building. You said it's 15 foot high and you have two rows of racks or 2 sets of racks. Is that excess material from a job site that is not used and comes back to the site? Are these brand new deliveries to the site and you're storing it until you deliver it to the site? And how does it get to the site? Lowboys, trailers?
Yes, sir, you're correct. Some of it is new, some of it is left over from material that was delivered directly to the site and is brought back to the yard if it can be utilized again and stored up on the racks.
So when you said most of the deliveries are by FedEx, there's a possibility you may have some larger vehicles for pipe deliveries, a lowboy or something to that size.
It's very few and far between, because mainly when we have a pipe delivery, it's to the job. So the pipe makes it back to our facility on our lowboys or our trailers that are part of our operation.
Okay, so it's not like you're having random delivery service deliver pipe. It's people who are familiar with the site and drive it on a daily basis.
That's correct.
Okay. And then as far as the loading zone, so you said they're going to pull up to the building and drive in through the existing garage doors. So it looks like you have on the west side of the building at least 1 garage door that's to remain. On the south side of the building, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 openings, and then on the east side of the building, 1 opening. So all those are accessible. Truck deliveries will come right into the building and deliver materials.
That is correct.
And then you have a separate loading area also shown northeast of the building. It's 10 foot by 60 foot. It's in the vicinity of the 7,450 square foot portion of the building that's to be removed. You're going to be removing a 78 by 30 foot portion of the existing concrete pad and replacing it with gravel. And that loading area is shown within that gravel area. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Is there any other activities that are going to be taking place in in that gravel area? Any parking of equipment, any storage of materials, anything of that nature?
Not in that loading area. It's just gonna remain the existing concrete that's there, that the existing building stands on, which will be removed.
Would,
It won't be concrete in that area.
Brian, what was that? It would be concrete in that area, you say?
It won't be concrete. That area will be stone.
Okay. I guess I just want to make sure, obviously, we're showing a loading area that it's able to be maintained and we're not, causing issues later. Will the applicant have an issue with putting bollards along the north side of that spaced, appropriately, just so, we're not getting cars parking and stuff in that area, prohibiting that?
Okay.
That's a yes?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right.
Charlie, before you leave the loading, can I just ask a question? The one garage door that you have that's on the, I guess, the south side of the building, looks like it's blocked by a parking space. So is that going to be used as a parking space, or is it going to be used as a loading space?
For which area? I'm sorry.
There's in the front of the building where you have the handicap parking spaces, there's parking it says 7 existing parking spaces. There's a garage door behind it.
Yes, that is for the employees, for the administrative employees. And it's paid.
I understand that, but how are you going to use that space as a loading space? Like,
There's
how's
no-
that garage door used?
There's no loading use there. It's just an existing door.
Right, so then that space, like, that's what I'm talking about. It's just unclear. So that is there a garage door there?
There's a garage door there that, we can, I don't think it's been open in, not since 2015 at least, I'd say.
I just wanted to clarify that, because when Charlie was counting the garage doors on that side of the building, he was counting 5 of them, and really there's 4, right? That are
Right.
able to be used? Okay.
Hey, Matt?
Yes?
Yeah, am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I have a couple of real quick questions. But behind the proposed building, you have a sand, a topsoil, and a stone area. Is that gonna be concrete bins there for that stone to be? Is that gonna be concrete bins?
Yes, sir. That's gonna be a designated area so that they're in a specific location and maintained on the property.
Okay, now, how will that be delivered? Triaxles?
No, that usually comes on our trucks, sporadically. And again, that's just, sometimes, they're utilized on the excavation jobs. So we don't, and they're not very big stalls. There may be 2 loads of stone, 2 loads of stone or 2 loads of topsoil that it can hold, maybe 3.
My other question on the, I don't know which one, these columns are very hard to read, but you show propane tanks outside the shop. Are there gonna be bollards around that?
Yes, those are existing. The ones that are shown on the main building, is that the ones you're referencing to?
No, the new building.
Yes, those will be bollard as well. There's others on the existing building which are, have bollards in front of them.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could just jump back in with, Mr. Mullen, with the storage area, the sand, topsoil, and stone, that's all material, you're not bringing any construction debris back to the site?
That is correct. If there's some debris that comes back at the end of the day, it's there for a day or 2, and then it's loaded out, and brought to a facility.
Where will that be stockpiled?
That's usually, well, it usually either just sits in the truck. I mean, we try not to ever put it on the ground.
Okay.
And then as far as for the storage area for those different materials, so you said it's a concrete pad, and then around the perimeter, it's a 6-foot-high board-on-board fence. I'm just a little curious on how that's gonna hold up when you have trucks dumping
It'll be
material.
bin block, Charlie.
Bin block? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's all I have for right now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I have another question. Do you have any plans on expanding your business? Do you anticipate having more than 20 people on site in the near future?
I don't see us growing any larger than we are at this point right now. You know, if I was asked that question, I remember back in the original location, or the original time, and now we've grown since then, but I don't anticipate any real large growth, which is why we're trying to just be proactive and set the property this way, so that, you know, as it flexes back and forth, there's a spot for everything, and, you know, it functions as a stormwater, you know, is taken care of and within our limits.
Okay, my question is, right now, you're limiting yourself to 20 people. If you grew any bigger, you would be back before the board if you had to expand your business. You know, so, you know, do you anticipate in the next 5 years, you know, that you might be expanding or growing, having more people on site doing other things?
Mr. Nansen, I can address that because you know, when I get into the parking for the site.
Right, okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just jump back in with a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
For the applicant. So, and Mr. Murphy can probably talk about the parking as well, but, so we have 50 proposed parking spaces west of the existing NAP building, 9 by 18. That's for vehicles for employees, so it's the 20 on-site employees, and then is there, you know, you say most of your employees of the remaining 55, so I guess it's 35 is the balance. Do they drive directly to the site, or are they coming to the facility, parking in the morning, and then hopping on a crew truck to the site?
Want me to answer?
That would be applicant.
That's for you, Tom.
Yes, there is times where some employees park there, take their trucks and leave for the day when there are not job sites that are able to either have the vehicles on the site. But for the most part, they drive to the sites and you know, use the equipment that's at the site.
So the 50 spaces is only going to be fully utilized on the 3 times a year that you have your employee training?
That's correct.
Okay. And then along with that, you're proposing 10, 16, 36 concrete. I believe they're 30 by, let's see if I got a lateral dimension there. I think they're 30 by 10-foot spaces. Concrete pads along the west and the south side of the proposed infiltration basin, and also along the north side of the existing NE building. What type of vehicles and equipment are you working on there? Is it you know, pipelining trucks, bobcats, excavators? You know, pretty much gives the full list of, you know, any kind of equipment you'd be thinking that's going to be parking on site.
Yes, it's mainly comprised of jetback cleaners, TV trucks, a water truck, and the rehabilitation equipment. That's the boilers and steam trucks the extras that we use. And then mainly just support vehicles.
Mason dumps, any excavator or heavy equipment, is that parked on those pads inside the building?
Very rarely, the excavators and the heavy equipment are usually on the job sites. They're only really back to the yard when there's maintenance, or maybe cleanup that we have to do on our facility.
Okay, so when they do come back to the site, and the chance that they do, would you agree to a condition that they gotta be on concrete pads or inside the building?
Yes, which is why we were trying to maximize those spaces so that when there are times that equipment does come back to the yard, they have a proper place on it they can get parked on.
Okay, and then I just want to clarify, because there was talk about 2 trailers, refrigerated trailers for the pipelining material. Now, are those being relocated to the 10 by 40 foot storage container gravel space northwest of the infiltration basin?
They can be, right now they're located on the, let's see, the north side of the northeast side of the building, where it
Okay.
says existing trailer to be removed. There, you see there's 2 are there.
Okay.
That's kind of where they're sitting, over in that area, when the as-built was built.
Okay, so you have that one area that I just noted, the 10 by 40 northwest of the infiltration basin, that's for storage containers, and then you have a separate 80 foot by 20 foot hitch storage trailer gravel area immediately north of the 50 parking spaces just to the west of the building, the existing NAP building. So to the left, it's just going to be standard hitch storage trailers. There's not going to be parking of the heavy equipment in that area. It's just going to be the trailers themselves.
That's correct, just the trailers themselves.
And then the 10 by 40 is just going to be standard storage containers. And what kind of, what's the use of those? What's going to be stored in there? Any hazardous, flammable materials, anything of that nature?
There'll be no flammable materials in there. It's mainly just supplies for the different divisions that we have, so they have their own segregated storage container to work out of. So their hoses, there are pumps in there, electrical pumps, but shovels, that kind of stuff.
Okay, and then you have another separate rack area. It's you have an existing one that was approved when you first came to the board, immediately south of your material storage. It's kind of in the vicinity of where the new infiltration basin's going, and it's certainly expanded. But what's stored in that area in the rack storage? So it's
That's where the 50 by 30 pipe rack area is.
no, I apologize. So it's a 226 foot by 10 foot storage rack
I
area,
see.
and it's immediately north of your proposed concrete parking, just immediately south of the infiltration basin.
Yes, so that is a rack. It's just a metal racking system that we put dry liner on, which is not impregnated, it's just felt liner. And there's different sizes of it, and that could be stored outside. And they just sit on those racks on the concrete pad, and trucks park in front of that rack.
Okay. I think that's all I have for Mr. Mullen right now, Mr. Chair.
Real quick, you brought up a point that there was some refrigerated trailers, 2 of them. How are they powered? Are they diesel powered, or is that electric powered reefers?
No, they're diesel powered.
How often will they be running?
Not very often. They cycle when they have liner in them. They're very run quiet, because that's a procedure and a code that we have with a lot of cities when we're working in urban areas, that all of our equipment has silence mechanisms on them, and tier 4 required instruments on them. So They have sound deadening systems on them.
Okay, now, do they often run in your yard, or you run them there?
They do, yeah. Since we've been here.
Okay, Charlie, you have any issue with that?
I guess maybe it's a question for Mr. Howard, whether or not, first to Mr. Mullen, how long have you had him on the site? Years, months?
They've probably been on the site at least a year.
Matt, in the last year, has the township received any complaints from any adjoining property owners regarding noise?
No, no complaints. It's more just been our compliance checks, but nothing from the neighbors.
How is it on compliance?
Well, that's why they're here.
No, I mean, as far as the noise with the trailers.
No issues that we noticed.
Okay. Thank you.
Actually, and then just one last thing, Mr. Chairman, I promise, from Mr. Mullen. So, when the first plan set came around for this application, there was a flex warehouse space inside the existing building. That's being completely eliminated with the current iteration of the plans?
Yes, the flex space, it's all North American pipe storage.
All right,
Is
for
within
both
the
buildings
building.
existing and the proposed shop building, and then landscaper has already left the site, and that whole area is going to be in the vicinity of the proposed infiltration basin, correct?
That is correct.
All right, Mr. Chair, that's all I have.
Jennifer, do you have anything, Mr. Small?
She unmuted?
Jim, do you have anything for Mr. Mull?
You're unmuted, Jen.
She's still muted.
There we go. I do not. I do not.
Okay, thank you. Board member, Mr. Saya, do you have anything for Mr. Mull?
Give me a second to unmute as we go.
I'm good, sir, thank you.
Mr. Orozco,
Hang on.
No.
Mr. Merton? Hang on, Rich.
Okay.
There you go. Now you got it.
The only thing to follow up what we were saying before about the, business doing, I just wanted to know if the applicant is sure he's going to be able to keep the hours 7:30 to 5 if he has a busy load, workload during the given week. Is that going to be, or should he ask for a little bit more of a, time frame?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, as far as our growth, our hours still are the same. We're not a 24/7 company with services, unless there's a absolute emergency that's on one of our job sites at night. But I don't see any, future asking for more hours.
Okay, that's all I have.
Mr. O'Donnell?
The only thing I have is, have all the outside agency approvals been submitted and discussed?
Brian Murphy will get into that when he comes up next.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hughes?
No, I'm good, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Moretti?
Yeah, I'm good also.
Mr. Cantor?
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, am I missing anybody? Hearing none. Mr. Alfieri?
We'll now, Brian Murphy, who you've now qualified as both a planner and engineer, at the beginning of the meeting. Brian, do you need the site plan up during the course of your testimony?
Yeah, that would probably be the one I'll need.
You're
So
all
while
set,
that's
Brian.
coming up, Ryan, can you first describe for the board, and Mr. Mullen got into a lot of detail, but can you describe for the board generally what's being proposed through the addition of these improvements on site?
Sure. The existing building is roughly in the center of the site. It's the oddly-shaped building with a finger coming off of it. You'll notice a shaded area in the back or north side of that building. That area was actually in addition to the original building from years ago. Mr. Mullen has rehabbed the bulk of the building. That area is actually just a little too far gone. It's a bit unsafe actually, and so we want to demolish that. Right now, that's the area of his shop area for maintaining the vehicles. So we're going to propose to demolish that, and that's roughly 7,450 square feet, and then construct a new 9,600 square foot maintenance shop up on the northwest portion of the site. All maintenance of all the equipment is indoors, no maintenance out on the exterior. That was a stipulation of the prior approval, and it would remain. Also, there'll be one use here, which is North American pipe. No other uses will be on the site. Stormwater, right north of the building, you'll notice some larger parking stalls, kind of in an L shape. Those are all equipment storage. Behind those stalls is where we're going to put a recharge detention basin back behind that area to catch the increase in impervious surface. Originally, we had the vehicle storage area on stone. We wound up changing that to concrete. That obviously boosted up the impervious coverage on the site, but I think it's a better and safer condition, and it's typically what the township also wants. Basically, we're looking to kind of really define what's going to be on the site and delineate where everything's going to go, so there's no miscommunication between the applicant or the town, so everyone's clear. So we have all those parking areas for the construction vehicles. As we go around the site clockwise, to the west of the existing building is a 50-stall parking lot, and there's 9 existing stalls in front of the building as well. So that gives you 59 total parking spots, and that's only for employees and visitors. It's not for construction vehicles at all. And that, as Mr. Mullen indicated, roughly 20 people are in the building, but he currently has 55 employees. So, a couple times a year they all come. There's actually, it's going to be a little better, basically a room for meeting rooms for presentations and education rooms within the existing building. So from those parking stalls, that 50 parking stall bank, going north of that, immediately north, you'll notice a hatched area. That's where the hitch trailer parking will be. It's not for construction equipment, it's only the hitch trailers. And then as you come around that bend again to the northwest, that's where that pipe rack area that Mr. Mullen already described will be located. And then we get up towards the proposed shop. The entrance to the shops are going to be on the narrow side from the west and the east of the building. There was a question architecturally what the building looked like, and I'll get into that in a moment. To the west of that area, we'll have a bin block storage for sand, topsoil, and stone. And then as you continue around that building, we get to another shaded area. It says 6-on-6 board fence. That's the dumpster enclosure area. He will have 2 dumpsters that he'll be using, one for metal storage and the other one for typical trash, regular trash. He also owns a number of dumpsters, essentially, that rather than renting them and having them on site, he owns them and brings them to his own sites. They don't come back full. They're only empty when they come back to the site, and they would be stored in that area as well, empty. So it's large enough for the 2 that he'll use, and then the other ones that he will not be using other than when they go out to sites. We have the storage container area adjacent to that. for 12 storage containers. Mr. Mullen already described that. Basically, it's set up almost like a per team, so to speak. So all the equipment that each team would need is in that is in their particular storage unit. So it's pretty well organized. That's the bulk of the improvements. We're also providing 117 trees. That's going to be out along the main drive rather than on the interior of the site. One, I think they have a better chance of surviving out in that area rather than on the interior of a site like this with heavy equipment moving around and trucks going in and out. And also, it'll further basically hide the property from anyone's view. So when you look down the corridor as the pictures presented, right now you can kind of see the existing building. You really shouldn't be able to see it when we're done. And the proposed building is another 300 feet beyond that. So I don't think it will even be visible from the roadway. And the adjacent property owners are commercial. To the west is a heavily commercial use. And to the east, there's another storage yard right along our entrance. There is a single-family home and some other commercial uses further to the east, but there's a pretty substantial buffer there now. During the last meeting, we agreed to provide some evergreen plantings, which were installed and are presently there. But we have the wetland corridor also between those areas as well, so it's pretty heavily wooded and well buffered. The stormwater basin will have a bubbler to discharge out of the basin, and that is within the 100-foot stream corridor. It's permitted as long as we really don't have all that much alternative, which we really don't. We've gone back and forth with Mr. Cunliffe on the review and the design of this to get it to a point where he would feel comfortable and the town would feel comfortable. I believe we're there. So the bubbler, it's a recharge basin, would be utilizing the buffer, that 100 stream corridor just for the discharge of that basin with the bubbler. The trash area, as I indicated, that would be a 6-foot fence on 3 sides with stone below. The contractors in the existing building, basically it's going to be roughly half and half contractor office. And the rest would be basically the warehouse usage for NAP. With the anticipated social distancing, right now he has kind of an open floor concept with desks for a lot of his administration staff. We're anticipating that is not going to be the case any longer. So that's why we're going to kind of look at an increase of the area for office use rather than more restricted to smaller areas. So that our parking is still more than adequate. With that and with the new shop, we're looking at 35 total parking stalls required technically, and we have 59. As indicated, we have 55 total employees, so it's not going to be a problem with parking on the site with 59 in that particular condition. And there's 36 work vehicle stalls, as I indicated, in that L shape to the north side of the building. We went over the hours of operation. It would be 7:30 to 5, Monday through Friday. There are a number of waivers that we're looking for. There's 4 waivers that were previously granted at the 2018 meeting because they were provided at the 2015 meeting, and they're for water and sewer. And will continue to do so. Providing of an EIS, again, it's an existing active site where the expansion is kind of minimal compared to the site, so we would ask for a waiver for that. And the same goes for the National Resource Inventory, and as well as the traffic report. The traffic report was previously provided, and it was agreed upon that we would only be able to make a left out of the project, and that's a continued condition of the site. The other one is for the architectural plans. We provided a perspective. Basically, it's just going to be open inside. there's going to be no partitions or offices or rooms on the interior. And that was provided. I'll get into the architectural plan in a moment further. One tree and one truck for every 10 parking stalls, and along the building between the parking stalls. As we indicated, we're not providing it in those locations. We're providing it out in the front of the project, where I think it'll better serve the project to offer the project surrounding uses. For the main drives, they're required to be 30 feet. The existing drive is 25. It's been more than adequate for the use. This isn't a very highly intensive use as far as traffic goes. As Mr. Mullen indicated, that the teams kind of go out. They could be out for a couple weeks or a couple days, so that there's not a whole lot of in and out other than the office staff itself and the minor deliveries that they obtain. There are a few variances. This was originally a use variance, and it is still a use variance for the zone, but it's an expansion of a non-conforming use. So the burden is a little different for this because the use itself is existing. It's on the site. So really the question is, can the site handle the expansion of this use? Which we believe it will. It's 17.5 acres, where 6 acres is required. We're providing sufficient parking and sufficient buffering, and I don't see any impact to the surrounding area. It's basically been functioning this way as currently. The max building coverage, 3% is permitted. Previously, we had 4.25 was previously approved. We're now proposing 4.69, only because the new building is slightly larger than the area that we're taking down on the old building. It's just a more efficient size, and as Mr. Mullen indicated, we're trying to plan for really what he's looking for is, maybe some minor growth. His expansion area is kind of maxed out, so to speak, on the area that he can service. So we're looking at probably some minor expansion in the future, but not a whole lot is anticipated. Impervious coverage, 5% is permitted. We're at 8.13. Again, it's really the work areas that are the work truck area parking that's throwing this over. And I think the environmental benefit of having that paved as opposed to stone will definitely outweigh the granting of that variance. There's also a variance for multiple uses in the A6 zone. It's kind of funny the way it's worded, but it's multiple buildings and multiple uses. So we don't have multiple uses, we only have one use, but obviously we will have 2 buildings. I think the efficiency of taking down the old building or old portion of the building that's in disrepair and building a new building, rather than trying to add on to the old building and kind of I think it would be hard to do given the age of the old building. So we're technically looking for a variance for that as well. With regard to the lighting, we're going to need a variance for the lighting. We're providing adequate lighting in the employee parking area. That would remain and make sure that complies. The area around the proposed building, it's going to be lit on all 4 sides, but we're not looking to fully light the entire area. As indicated, that they're going to be closing at 5 o'clock, so it's really only a small portion of the year. And I think with the residents that are to the east of the property, I think we don't necessarily need all that much lighting on the site. So the bulk of the lighting that we're adding is all on the west side of the property, as far away from those residents as possible. Again, I feel these variances can be granted without detriment to the zone plan or master plan. It's an existing use. It's really just an expansion of that same use. He's been fortunate enough to be successful, and he's staying in Howell, and likes the purpose of the site and the use of the site, and will advance the purposes of the municipal land use law by promoting public safety and health by demolishing the dilapidated building and providing a new building, and provide sufficient space and appropriate locations for commercial uses. And again, it's an expansion of this use, and I think it's a good expansion of the use, and I see no negative impact to the surrounding area or the public good.
Brian, Brian, I'm sorry, I have more before I ask you a follow-up?
Just a little bit. Could we just bring up the architecture real quick?
1 second.
Sure. Thank you. There we go. So the way we have it set up is the north and south side of the building, they'll be the same, as will the east and west. They'll look exactly the same. So we're providing a break in the building of rather large window towers, essentially, that go up the side of the building, which is those darker blue areas. They're 6 by 20 feet. So that's to break up the facade and also provide natural light into the building. On the west and east side of the building, we will have the garage doors. So that there's a couple of waivers that are associated with the architecture of the building. Articulation of the base course and cornices. The cornices are not articulated. You'll notice it's kind of hard to see on this picture, but there's at the water table level at the bottom of the building, there'll be a stone veneer that'll go onto the building to complement the color of the building and of the color of the existing facility. This is basically going to pretty much match in color to the existing building as well. Facades and exteriors, walls greater than 50 feet shall have projections or recesses in a minimum of 3 feet over 10% of the facade. We don't have that. Basically, the wall runs flat, but we are providing those windows. We feel it kind of meets the intent of that by breaking up the building. And the other one is no wall shall have a blank uninterrupted length exceeding 50 feet in length. Again, I feel that the windows basically satisfy that by breaking up the wall side. It's 120 feet, so we're basically breaking those up to 40-foot sections to meet the order. And again, I think these waivers can be granted really with no impact. No one's going to see this building other than the employees of the applicant, and it's near 970 feet off the roadway through trees, and I just don't see any impact to any surrounding uses. That's all I have, Sal.
Brian, there are a series of technical comments that we didn't go point by point on that were raised either through the engineer, the planner, or Barry's report. You're prepared to address all of those comments to the satisfaction of those respective professionals?
Absolutely.
In addition, there is a comment from the Board of Health that the septic system will have to be upgraded, and we've agreed to comply with that as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, it will definitely have to be upgraded. I wasn't going to go through those design plans and approvals until obviously we knew that the board was going to act favorably on this. But we fully understand that we're going to have to expand the size of the septic field.
And what other outside agency approvals would be required as part of this, if this were granted?
Soil erosion, the county. That's really about it right now.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Alfieri, Mr. Murphy, is there going to be a restroom in this new building?
No.
No restroom?
No. Existing building.
They'll go from out there all the way up to the existing building for the restroom?
Yeah. Yeah, it's only 150 feet, something like that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I can...
The site lighting around the building, is that going to be down-facing lighting? Also with the parking lot, is that all going to be down-face lighting?
Yes, basically they're typical mounted lighting on the building itself. The only pole lighting will be out on the parking lot.
Now, that will all be shielded and down-faced, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, before we, does anybody need to take a break at this point? We're almost 9:30.
Do you want to go through board questions really quick of Mr. Murphy? I have everybody off mute right now.
Mr. Chairman, could I jump in with a couple questions for Mr. Murphy real
Yes,
quick?
sir.
Then maybe we should go.
So, just to piggyback on the lighting that the chairman said, I think the lighting plan specifies 4,000 K bulbs. Would you have an issue with switching those to 3,000 K, being that you're in a residential area?
No issue.
Okay. I just want to clarify, around the shop building, it looks like you have, like 50 foot around the perimeter of that, 45, 50 foot along the west and 50 foot along the north. Obviously, in case of needs to get in there. Is there, sorry, so you have 50 foot where only 30 foot's required for circulation for emergency purposes. You're not using any of that space for parking of equipment or vehicles or anything like that?
No, we demonstrate on page 2 of the plans that the circulation around that building and just to get around the building.
Okay. Sorry, hold on. I had another note on here. So I just want to clarify that for the board too, regarding the stream corridor. So the Ardena Brook does pass along the east side of the property here. The applicant currently has shown a 100-foot stream corridor buffer. What the ordinance actually requires is it's a 100-foot stream corridor and then an additional 100-foot stream corridor buffer. Where you just superimpose that onto the plans. A portion of the existing site gravel driveway is within that stream corridor buffer, that 100-foot additional stream corridor buffer, and then also part of the perimeter basin discharge, so the RCP pipe, the bubbler inlet, and riprap. The ordinance does allow within that 100-foot stream corridor buffer for stormwater management infrastructure to be in there. If there's no other reasonable means for that to be located, I think, Brian, you provided testimony that, there's not really any other feasible location without putting it in the site driveway or going all the way to the stream itself to locate that, correct?
Agreed. Yeah.
All right, and then just with the stormwater management system, obviously we went back and forth a lot. So you got a pretty extensive collection and conveyance system. All the inlets on site are going to have inlet filter bags. You'll provide an updated O&M manual for like replacement of those, operation of the infiltration basin. Sorry, I lost myself in train of thought there for a second. As far as the basin itself for construction, would the applicant have any issue, during construction, prior to placement of the sand layer, performing 2 additional infiltration tests, just certifying that the soil is suitable prior to placement of the infiltration layer?
Yeah.
Okay, and then obviously I just note if there's any unusual encounters of seasonal high water table during construction, that the applicant be required to notify the, the township engineering department in writing prior to proceeding with, construction of the basin. Let's see if I have anything else. And then the one thing I think you might have breezed over, Brian, is the waiver for the surfacing of the parking area. So the requirement is all parking areas have to be surfaced with asphalt, and the area west is proposed as gravel. Can you touch on that?
Sure. The only stalls are proposing to have paved, and they're already paved because they're part of the original plan with handicap stalls right in front of the. The rest of it is stone. It's currently stone in that area. There's no issues with the stone currently, and I'd rather not add more impervious to the site, to a site that's functioning. And as we discussed, we're not looking at visitors here. We're looking at employees only that are familiar with the site and familiar with the surfaces. Right now the lighting is sparse, to say the least, in that area. So we're going to substantially increase the lighting in that area for safer conditions.
Okay, and then you touched on it as well, the concrete pads for all the equipment storage. Obviously, so, you know, that we prefer that for the heavy equipment. All those areas are being routed to the basin for water quality, correct?
That is correct, absolutely.
And all I have for Mr. Murphy, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, I just have a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Yes. Ms.
Brian, we're talking, I'm referring to the dumpster enclosure area.
Jen, hold on just a second. Matt, could you mute everybody, please?
Yeah, I'm just doing that now because we're getting some feedback.
Thank you.
You
Okay,
good?
just-
Okay.
Go ahead.
So you have, you're proposing a board-on-board fence over, around a gravel area for the dumpster?
Correct.
In my May 5th review letter, we recommend that it be a masonry block enclosure on concrete as opposed to the board-on-board and the gravel.
Okay. We have no issue with that if that's what the board wants, and it will increase our impervious coverage to 8.26%.
Anticipated that question, did you?
Exactly.
I would prefer to see it on concrete and grant the relief, Mr. Chair, from the impervious. It's a de minimis increase from what they're currently proposing. And then the only other thing I had was right next to that dumpster area where you have the 10 by 40 storage containers on gravel.
Sure.
Is that where the trailers are going to be relocated to?
Yeah.
So, because like it says trailers to be relocated, but then you're talking about storage containers. It's the same thing, right?
Yeah, if you count them up, there's 12 being relocated, and that's the 12.
Okay, I just want that for clarification purposes. I think that Mr. Murphy had hit on all my other comments, and I just want to state for the record that I take no exception to the testimony. I agree that it's an expansion of a non-conforming use, and that, you know, the burden is much lower than a typical D1 variance. You just have to demonstrate that the site can accommodate the increase, and I think that the testimony that Mr. Murphy put forward has met that statutory obligation. And a couple of the bulk requirements, specifically for coverage, the increase in the building coverage is de minimis, so I would take no exception to that. And I would prefer the trucks, as the board has typically required any vehicle storage be put on concrete versus gravel, especially given the proximity to the wetland area and the stream. So I would take no exception to that relief either. And I know you guys all may have a heart attack when I say this, but the architecture, which is normally a point for me, in this particular instance, I do think that they've met the intent, and given the configuration of the site and how far off the road it is, and it's completely surrounded by heavily wooded area, you're not going to get anybody to really see it. So I would take no exception to the relief required in that instance, but this is something that I typically don't recommend. So, but in this particular instance, and I do recall when they came in several years ago, we had asked for increased buffering because of that, and they have put those in and are proposing additional landscaping. So I don't take exception to the waivers on the architecture either. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Shapiro.
Sherry, unmute Sherry.
Sherry there?
Hold on, we have to unmute her. Go
Hi,
ahead, Sherry.
Yeah, they wrapped up all the issues I had. About some of the species, increased some of the species on it, and they all their tree replacement requirements planted on site with these plants.
So you have no objection?
I have no objections.
Okay. Okay, before we move over to the board's questions, let's take a 5-minute break, if you don't mind. We'll be back at 9:45. It's a little more than...
The board will take a short recess and be back at 9:45. The zoning board will now reconvene.
Okay, I think as we left off, we were going to go through the board members and their questions. We'll start with Mr. Cantor.
Hold on 1 second, we have to unmute everyone.
Yep.
I have just one question. Do the lights go off at night, or are they on a timer?
Yeah, the bulk of them will go off. We'll have some minor security lighting, but nothing crazy.
Thank you.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
do you have a question for Mr. Murphy? No? Mr. Roscoe, do you have a question for Mr. Murphy? No? Okay. Mr. Hughes?
Mute him again.
No, sir, I'm clear, thank you.
Mr. O'Donnell?
This is just for the applicant and the professionals. The questions?
Any questions?
Okay, I have a few. We have a letter from the fire chief about the road. Has that been, for the fire truck?
Yes, provided a turning template around each building.
Right, and that road would be heavy enough to sustain a fire truck coming in.
Yeah, it sustains the vac trucks, which are similar in size and weight. Actually, probably heavier. Fire truck.
All right, another question. The current septic tank was proposed and paved under the parking lot. Has that been corrected? Moved? Running under the road?
Matt, we're getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah, I didn't hear that. I didn't understand the question.
Tom, can you try and repeat it a little louder?
The county, the Monmouth County Board of Health.
Yes.
They wanted to know, it says, our records indicate the existing septic system is located under a proposed paved parking area. Has that been ironed out?
Yeah, we're gonna go back.
We
Mr. Murphy
Go
indicated.
ahead, Sal, sorry.
We're gonna go to the we're gonna go to the Board of Health. We didn't want to go to the Board of Health until we got through this board, but we will separately go to them and get separate approval from them.
Okay. And then I have, for Shari, I have a letter from the township. It was from the Environmental Commission for the plat review. They had no problem with anything environmentally, but the Shade Tree Commission made a big note about the trees and the amount, the money that would be owed. And it kind of conflicts with Sherry's report with the CME. Are they aware of the letter from the Shade Tree Commission?
I don't know if I've seen that letter. What they state in it?
Well, it's a Shade Tree Commission comments. Applicant is removing 478 trees, proposing to replace only 117 trees, which a difference of 361 trees. Per ordinance 188-195C, applicant must pay $300 per tree or $108,300 into the township tree fund, or $35,000 per developed acre. It appears the applicant is misrepresenting ordinance 188-195C. So, you know, big disparity.
Yes, so I do remember reading that. I think they're trying to say that they should measure their whole property and go by that. I think that's what they were pointing out, which is not how we do it. We typically do the amount of trees you're removing, the area that's based on. That's your $35,000 per acre, not you own 50 acres and we're just gonna use the 50 acres. That's, you know. But yeah, they calculate it based on the max number of the area of clearing, not of the area of the entire property.
So Sherry, in your opinion, this report that they did is inaccurate?
Yes, yeah, we've never calculated any clearing like that before.
Okay, I just wanted to bring that point up so it didn't become an argument later.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Moretti,
Nothing at this time.
okay. Have I left anyone out?
We're just me, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Mr. Merton, I didn't see you on the screen there. Okay,
I'm here. Yeah, what Sherry said answers my question. It was a thing the shade tree did, was concerned, but because a lot of them are new, we're not aware of the tree management formula, and I was not 100%, so that comment did come from the shade tree, but I'm okay with Sherry's response to that.
okay, professionals, any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Okay, Mr. Tropoli, how are we gonna move this now? Mr. Alfieri, are you done with your direct testimony here?
Yes, we're done with direct, and we would just, we have to open it up to the public if there is any.
No.
That's correct. Mr. Chair, perhaps what we should do then is open it up to the public, remind the public that whomever is participating will need to be sworn and affirm that they are raising their right hand because I can't see the public. And if you want to just do it first for questions of both witnesses, and then again, open it up for final comments, would probably be the cleanest thing.
Okay, Eileen, how many do we have that, is there any way of knowing how much public participation are out there?
Right now, based on the list of who's in the meeting, we have one person on the phone with a New Jersey phone number. Is that Mr. Mullen? Tom, are you still on the phone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that might be Tom. What we'll do is we'll take the whole group off mute. It might get a little loud with background noise and feedback, but we'll keep everybody off mute for a minute. It takes about 10 to 15 seconds for YouTube to catch up. Eileen is going to recite the phone number and the call-in passcode. We'll give it a minute, see if anybody calls in. If not,
Okay,
we could close it.
do we not have anybody that's on right now?
It does not appear so, but I'm going to still open it up just in case.
Okay.
So I'm going to unmute now, and Eileen will recite the number.
Do you need to open it? Wendell, do you need to get a motion to open first?
Yeah, I need a motion to open the public.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Mr. Cantor,
Second by Hughes.
and then seconded by Mr. Hughes. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Okay, at this time, the chairman has opened up the meeting to the public for any questions or comments on the Bennett Road Associates application. If you have to ask a question, you may call 1-833-247-7123. Again, that phone number is 1-833-247-7123. When you call in, you will need the meeting ID code, which is 296-6452, and the PIN code is 3333.
If you have no questions and want to mute yourself, feel free to do so.
We'll give the members of the public just another minute or so. Can you just scroll down to? I don't think there's anybody there. We're not seeing anyone calling in on this application. Hold on one
Okay,
second.
Mr. Tropoli,
Hang on 1 second.
Right, let's just clarify to be sure.
one moment
Who's
longer. It is a long number to call in. Let's just give it one more moment.
Who lives by a train track?
That's me.
That's coming down, not coming through.
You're in a train.
Charlie will get it in about 5 or 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
The good old North Jersey coastline, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see anyone on the phone. We have nobody calling in.
Mr. Chair, I think it's time to close it up.
Okay, can I have a motion to close public?
Oh, I have a bunch of people.
Hold on, they're muted, Wenzel, 1 second.
Okay. Please say your name.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Mr. O'Donnell made the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Seconded by Mr. Mertens. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Yes.
Seeing none. Mr. Alfieri, would you like to make a closing statement?
Very briefly, Mr. Chair, thank you all for your time. We believe we've addressed all the comments of your professionals and any questions the board members had. It's a good use. It's a use that hasn't disrupted the town or the neighbors in any way. That the board grant the approval that's been applied for.
Okay. Professionals, any further comments or statements?
Welcome to Bon Intelligent Workout Planning. Bon's workouts take the guesswork out of
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
No, Mr. Chair, nothing further.
Sherry? Okay. Seeing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion. I would like to make a motion to approve application case BA 14-09A2. This motion includes all the professional specifics that have been set forth in the testimony. This will include all issues that have been agreed upon by the applicant. All details set forth in the resolution shall be followed by the applicant. 2 notes. I agree with Jennifer, concrete versus gravel. And I also believe that the positive criteria burden has been met, and the board should issue all variances requested. Thank you.
Motion by Mr. O'Donnell. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Roscoe, second.
Roll call.
Any further?
Oh.
Yes, let's do a roll call.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Mertens?
Yes.
Mr. Moretti?
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Orozco?
Yes.
And Mr. Cantor?
Yes.
And Chairman Nansen, I'm sorry.
Wrong meeting.
It is.
Absolutely. The answer is yes, the applicant has met their burden. Charlie is satisfied with the water situation. Jennifer, I'm just so stunned that you let the building go.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you, Jim. It's so far back, nobody's ever gonna see that. And for a mechanic shop, it's very feasible. So my vote is yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very
Randall,
much.
I agree with you. I'm waiting for her comment.
Good luck.
Thank you. I'm going to put
Okay,
all the board
next
members on mute
application
now.
before the board. Case number BA 1911, K10 Holdings, LLC. Use variance. Application of K10 Holdings, LLC is applicant and Robert Stefani, LLC is owner, seeking a use variance plan approval to construct 4 new multi-tenant warehouse structures with associated office space, various concrete walks, trash enclosures, 2 stormwater management basins, and floating septic fields on premises known as Block 41, Lot 2602, 413 Oak Glen Road. This application was originally scheduled to be heard October 28, 2019, when it was carried to December 9, 2019, with no further notice. After some testimony of December 9, 2019, the application was carried to February 10th with no further notice. February 10th, 2020, the application was carried to April 27th, 2020, and on April 27th, it was carried to May 18th, 2020. I just want to, there was testimony on the 9th. That's correct. Okay. Expiration date, June 30th, 2020. Eligible voters, Mr. Hughes, Mertens, Moretti, O'Donnell, Orozco, Cantor. I have certified that I reviewed the December 9th meeting.
And so has Mr. Saya.
Mr. Saya is also available. Okay, Mr. Alfieri.
Again, thank you, Salvatore Alfieri, on behalf of the applicant. As the board chairman indicated, we were here for one night of testimony previously. At that time, the board requested that a traffic report be prepared by Mr. Miskovich. We did present the engineering testimony and architectural testimony to the extent we had that testimony. If you recall, this is a bifurcated application, so we're here simply for the use tonight. If this use is approved, we will be back with a full site plan application. Another thing to remind the board is it's a split zoned property. Part of it's in the SED zone, part of it's in the ARE6 zone, and that's why we're before the board, because of the residential component of the property. Mr. Miskovich, our two witnesses tonight, although our engineer is present, if we need him, we intend to call only Mr. Miskovich and our planner, Christine Cafone. They both did testify at the last hearing, but they need to supplement their testimony based upon the new report.
That's correct. Both were previously sworn, and both remain under oath for tonight's proceeding. And turn it back over to you. That must be you, Charlie. It's not me.
Yeah, that's it.
A couple other things I just wanted to remind the board. We did stipulate at prior hearings certain points that I'm going to just put on the record so we're clear. We did agree that we would comply with the 50-foot buffer on Oak Glen Road. We agreed that we would put the dumpsters in masonry block structures if and when we come back for site plan approval. We agreed to limit the office space in the warehouses to no more than 10%. We agreed that the hours of operation for the front buildings at the time of the testimony would be 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. We also agreed that the rear buildings will have the same architectural design as the front buildings, because we did submit architectural plans for those front buildings. We agreed that one of the neighbor across the street had concerns. He didn't object to the application, but he had concerns that headlights might shine onto his property across the street. And we agreed that when we came back for site plan, we would properly screen that to the satisfaction of the board professional. And again, the board requested the traffic report, and I'm going to now call Mr. Miskovich. I don't see him, but I know he was on.
He
Frank,
is
are you
on, and he is unmuted.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Frank, would you summarize for the first? Would you summarize for the board the results of the traffic report that you prepared and submitted?
Well, we can do this two ways. I can be very brief going through that, or we can spend a lot of detailed time going through it. But let me just back up a minute. At the last hearing that I testified on, I presented traffic testimony regarding the traffic impacts of this facility. I provided estimates of truck traffic based on the ITE publication, Trip Generation Manual 10th edition, and actually the supplement that was published in February of this year. I had originally evaluated the impacts at the Oak Glen Road intersections with Lanes Pond Road and the site driveway. And the board had asked about the impacts at the intersection of Oak Glen Road with Lakewood Farmingdale Road and Maxim Southern Road. This was also raised by your engineer. So after some discussions at that meeting, we agreed to provide an analysis of these two intersections. The board also had some questions, or raised some questions regarding weight limit restrictions on these roadways and the speed limit on Oak Glen Road. So we did go out and do traffic counts, and I provided the board with a supplemental report that's dated March 14th, 2020, wherein I addressed these issues. And T&M also provided the board with a review letter dated May 7th. As I summarize my report, I'll attempt to address those comments that were raised in the T&M review letter, and if I miss some, I'm sure I will be asked those questions. Let me just go through what we found through our inventory. I went out and I drove the area roadways on February 20th this year, looking for speed limits and weight restrictions, and I summarized these in page 1 of the supplemental report. Oak Glen Road is posted for 45 miles per hour from Lakewood Farmingdale Road up to Maxim Southern Road, and Lakewood Farmingdale Road is posted at 50 miles an hour. And so those are the primary roadways we looked at. I think what's more important to the board, there were no weight restrictions that I observed along the entire length of Oak Glen Road, all the way from Lakewood Farmingdale Road up to Old Tavern Road. Likewise, there's no weight restrictions observed along Lake Farmingdale Road. Matter of fact, most of the other roadways, like Lanes Mill Road, Maxim Southern Road, had no weight limit restrictions except for 2 instances. At the intersection of Victory Road and Maxim Southern Road, there was a sign facing westbound traffic that said no MAT delivery trucks. That was over by the Howell Community Church. The other was a weight limit restriction of 10 tons at the bridge over by Lake Louise. So basically the area roadways really don't have any truck weight restrictions. I think what was important on this one when we went through our study, typically we had looked at the peak commuting hours, which are like 7 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m. This time we did a full 12-hour count from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Excuse me. I selected those hours because I wanted to give the board a thorough understanding of what the traffic impacts could be over this time period. If you look at the IT research data, that time period accounts for about 94% of the daily traffic and especially truck traffic at most industrial uses. Very little activity during the late evening and early morning hours. So I think that time period captured the bulk of any traffic generation or activity that might be generated by this site. But we went a step further. In that 12-hour period, which we recorded at 15-minute intervals, we summarized vehicle classification, number of cars, school buses, 3 or axle trucks, tractor trailers, etc., by turning movement. So we can determine operating conditions at these 2 intersections, and also, and more importantly, how much traffic was on Oak Glen Road because of that. I have a report, table 1 in my supplementary report, where I summarize that. And basically, if I go through those numbers, we're talking about on Lakewood Farmingdale on Oak Glen Road from Lakewood Farmingdale to Lanes Pond Road, you're talking about 111 truck trips that we recorded during that 12-hour period. That's about 3.7% of the truck activity, traffic activity. But almost 94% were cars and small trucks. From Lanes Pond Road north, we recorded 38 trucks during that time period, only 1.8%. And I think when you look at those numbers in the trucks that we did count, the majority of those, I believe, are being generated by United Natural Foods. That seems to be the only major distribution or warehouse center on that roadway. But we did count number of trucks, and we found that there are truck activity on Oak Glen Road. So what we're proposing as far as this smaller warehouse activity, we are going to generate trucks, but we're also generating trucks on the road that is currently handling trucks. The TM memorandum or review letter of May 17th had the first two comments dealt with our traffic volumes and counts that we did, and I want to point out we did find some errors. Basically, they asked about the peak hour in the morning at the Oak Glen Road and at Lakewood Farmingdale Road, and over at Oak Glen Road and Maxim Southern Road, where there was a sharp peak during the morning peak hours. But what we found going through that in the tables, there was a typographical error on page B3 for the southbound Lakewood Farm Road through movement at 10 a.m. The table actually had 546 vehicles during that 15-minute period when it should be 46. The peaks are 8:15, 15, and 4:30 to 5:30 at that intersection. At Maxim Southern Road, we also found a typographical area on page B7 of the report for the eastbound Maxim Southern Road left turn movement at 7:15 a.m., where our table had 254 vehicles during that 15-minute period when it should be 25. So those were errors in the tables in the appendix of the report, but the actual peak hours that we use are correct. There was no discrepancy in those hours and the analysis that we did. The only change that we found was in table 1 was for Oak Glen Road between Lakewood Farmingdale Road to Lanes Pond Road during the morning peak hour, that the total number of vehicles increased from 369 to 391, which is small. Total number of trucks went from 13, where they actually stayed the same. And the number of small cars and trucks went from 340 to 369. Every other volume in that table remains the same, and the peak hours are representative in the calculations. There was a question raised about the growth rate. If you recall, back in our May 6, 2000, our original traffic report, we projected traffic to the year 2023 using a background growth rate of 2.75%. And this is the rate used by NJDOT for an interstate highway. Well, since we updated the traffic counts this year in 2020, the supplemental report updated the projection to the year 2024. So we discounted that first year. We also looked at traffic count data in the area, and we found that there was actually a reduction in DOT data from 2013 to 2016 along Lakewood Farmingdale Road. Actually a 5% reduction in peak hour volumes. And if we look at Oak Glen Road, which we consider either a collector road or principal arterial, NJDOT suggests 1% growth rate. However, we continue to use the higher 2.75% rate as we did in the prior traffic report. And that, you can find those numbers, and we stated that on page 3 and in figure 2 of our supplemental report. So I think our projection of traffic is actually very conservative using those higher numbers.
Frank, if I could just jump in, I just want to make sure it's clarified for the board. So that 2.75% growth rate, that's on top of the existing traffic that you measured in February of this year, correct?
That's correct.
All right, so even the traffic counts on Lakewood Farmingdale Road would show a 5% decrease. You taking into the current traffic estimates is a more conservative approach, correct?
That's correct. I just want to point out that we looked at whatever data was available in the area and the growth rates, and they're all much lower than the 2.75%. That was just to point that we are providing something conservative. So the simple question is 2.75% was added to all the vehicle movements at the intersections and projected out to the year 2024.
Now,
Is that clear, sir?
Yep.
Okay. And I think we went another step further. At the meeting, there was concern raised about how can we anticipate traffic volumes without knowing who the tenants will be. Well, I testified before that we use ITE data, which is used by planners, traffic engineers, site engineers, townships, in estimating traffic from potential developments. Table 2 of my supplemental report summarized a number of land use categories that would fill into the industrial type categories, such as general light industrial, manufacturing, specialty trade contractor, which we agreed that was not going to be at this facility, warehousing, and my traffic report of May 6, 2019. I gave the IT definition so there's an understanding of what these uses are in the peak hours, and a daily estimate of the number of trucks from each of those uses. And that was based on the square footage of this proposed facility. And then basically, Table 2 ranges from 19 trucks up to 49 trucks for warehousing, with 36 for manufacturing. If I look at the specialty trade contractors and figure 6,000 square foot units, I'm at 48 trucks per day with that facility. So the 42 trucks that I estimated is fairly consistent with all these other activities for the same square footage. So I think that's a very realistic number of what we may anticipate from this facility. I also went another step further, and in Table 3 of the report, I looked at several different scenarios using different land use classifications to estimate daily traffic, truck traffic, and peak hour traffic. In other words, I looked at a combination of all warehouse and office, especially trade contractor, etc., and looked at the traffic generation that would present. My original traffic report was estimating 31 and 32 a.m. and p.m. peak hour trips. And that's fairly consistent with some of the other use scenarios. But in scenario 4 is a specialty trade contractor, which has a much higher trip generation, estimates about 120 to 142 peak hour trips, AM and PM, almost 4 times higher than I had in my original report. So I thought if I presented an analysis of the traffic impacts of the 2 off-site intersections using that higher scenario, that would be the worst case scenario of traffic impacts. So I went ahead and I did that analysis. And even at that scenario estimates 48 trucks per day, whereas my original report was 42. So it was fairly consistent with that number. As I went through the analysis of both intersections, I found that the levels of service did not change from no build to build, meaning if I looked at the analysis with traffic projected out to 2024 and then added site traffic, we still have the same operating levels of service. The only thing that did change was under this worst case scenario of the specialty trade contractor, that during the evening peak hour we would have a level of service E for the Oak Glen Road eastbound left turn, the left turn to head north on the Lakewood Farmingdale Road. But that would still operate at level of service E, but it would have an increase of delay of 6.6 seconds, which is not really significant when we look at overall traffic operations. But again, that is a worst case scenario where I have a much higher background growth rate, and I also have traffic generation 4 times higher than we're anticipating from this site. So having summarized all that in the analysis, and I believe that everything we've said before and what we've done with this particular analysis, that this site, the roadways and intersections surrounding this site and servicing this site can operate as satisfactorily.
So Frank, if I could just jump in to clarify that. So with the level of service, you said there's a change with the left-hand turning movement. That's only worst case scenario if you had specialty trade contractors, which the applicant already agreed there's not gonna be any of that with this application, correct?
That's correct.
Under the proposed operation warehouse office, there's no change in level of service, then the delay is virtually the same?
That's correct.
All right.
And Frank, one of the questions that was raised at the last meeting by the board planner was after we did an analysis of the traffic, would we consider potentially reducing the size of the front building or buildings? But since the traffic issues don't exist in your report, the applicant did agree to consider that point, and I believe you're going to place on the record a offer to the board as to a reduction in the size of the buildings.
Yes, after we heard the board's comments and concerns at the last meetings, and we went back and this was discussed with the applicant, and the engineers came up with a revised concept plan that I believe was submitted to Eileen. In essence, if you recall, there were the two front buildings near Oak Glen Road. Excuse me. There was a colored rendering there, Eileen.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It might be easier to see.
Yeah, that might be easier.
Yeah.
And we should mark
Yeah,
this before you testify.
That would be A24.
And A24 is a colored rendering of the revised,
Actually, that's not the revised rendering, that's the prior one,
No,
which is,
that's-
I think, a reference. If you look at the two buildings that are in the lower left corner, there's two structures with 3 units each, totaling 6,000 square feet per unit. So those 6 units in those two buildings is 36,000 square feet. The concept that we revised is, we took, if you look at those two buildings, the one that's furthest to the east or to the right, that end unit, we've eliminated that. So we've taken that 6,000 square foot unit and reduced those two buildings to a total of 30,000 square feet. But we maintained 6 units, but reduced each unit size to 5,000 square feet. What that allowed us to do, if you look at that last unit in that second building,
What's that? Is that the same?
I don't know, do you have that, Eileen? Then
Hold on one
maybe
second.
maybe it's the non-colored one.
E-
There it
that
is.
one, that'll work too, yeah.
Yeah.
You,
Can we get the data, because I don't know if that was submitted with the traffic report.
But and that's, you can see the two, oh,
Tell the date on that.
that's,
Is this the right one?
yeah, that's it. So you see those two buildings to the lower left of the drawing. The first building shows 4 units. The size of that remains the same, except it is now gone from 3 units at 6,000 square feet, square feet each, to 4 at 5,000 square feet. The second building there, you see 2 units in there, which are 5,000 square feet. Where you see the proposed septic has been taken, that portion of the building's been taken away. So in essence, you're going to wind up a little bit more open space at that far end. So
I
we
would
balanced,
rather, excuse me, I'd rather see the open space towards Oak Glen, not towards the center of the site. You know, our whole point was to get more front, more space between the building and Oak Glen Road, having further distance than, that's not what we were looking at to do. I would like to see the front building just eliminated and use one building there. It doesn't make sense. You're keeping the same footprint of the front building.
Eileen, do you have if you can find the rendering of this?
The rendering I
Is
got
the
is the same as the other one that was
Okay.
earlier
Well,
submitted.
I don't know, I'm moving a pointer. Does anybody see the pointer?
No.
Yeah. I think that when we're looking at this, these first, the second building, if you will, we had 4 units that were in the ARE6 zone.
How did I get this in?
By making this change, we've reduced that from 4 to 3 that are in the ARE6 zone. That building in front is basically in the SED. At least 3 of the units are in the SED zone. So that's why we did that way, to eliminate the encroachment into the ARE6 zone.
But to the chairman's point, and we may have to ask Anthony, who is our chair and who testified at the last, to change that configuration to keep the same 30,000 square feet that we are now proposing, but move it further off Oak Glen?
Well, I don't like to, at a meeting, start looking at plans and how we can shift things. But in the general response to that question, on this drawing where you see an open area to the left of that circulation drive, and there looks like you can see the dash line in that second building. Where that open area, there was another building there. In essence, if you kept that, I imagine you can take the first unit off that first building. Still maintaining that square footage. The only difference is you have an extra unit back to the 4 units within the ARE6 zone. So all I'm saying is that if we go back to the original plan, Eileen?
Hold on one second.
Anthony? Yeah, that one. In that second building from Oak Glen Road, we took that last unit off to the right.
Correct.
All right? And because that took that unit out of the ARE6 zone, which basically goes around that building and up between the two. I believe what is being suggested is, instead of taking that last unit off, if we eliminated that first unit in building 1 to the left.
I
Is
want
that
to
what
go
you're-
back to Jennifer on that.
I don't, yeah, I don't like doing things at the meetings, but I'm just trying to understand what's to be done.
Well,
I don't
we
know if the ballot
wanted,
wouldn't go to me before, that's why I had problems.
Jennifer, I'm going to let you jump in here.
So basically, I think the intention was to eliminate building in the ARE zone district, which was my recommendation at the time. And the zone line is really unusual. It kind of like jogs around the existing building and then comes back towards the southern boundary line. So, it's hard to tell without the zone line being on that actual sheet. I'm looking at it from the cover sheet of the set of plans. So I think when we had discussed removing part of the building was specifically related to the fact that there was that second building, I think almost in its entirety, is in the ARE6 zone. Is that correct, Frank?
That's correct.
So, personally, I think what we had asked was to eliminate that building. I mean, to be fair, the site pretty densely proposed. And so what we received was a removal of one of the units, which is going in the right direction. And it's really hard, and I agree with Frank, but it's hard to see where that zone line is on that rendering and whether or not they removed enough of the building in that residential zone or not. I can't tell.
Yeah, I can't either.
Do you
I
know?
don't have that drawing.
I'm gonna try and put up the two drawings next to each other, just give me a second.
Yeah, the rendering, I guess that was done, I don't know if it was done today or just recently. It's the same site plan that you have, but the rendering has the zone line in bold black lines, which is easier to fit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
think it was,
basically, the easterly end of that first building, that last unit on that first building is that's where the zone line goes through, approximately. So probably 1/4 of that building is in the ARE 6 zone.
Of the back building? Oh,
No,
there
the
you go.
first,
But that's the old plan, right? With the 6 units?
I'm just trying, I don't see any drawing up. I'm just trying to, there you go,
Right.
the one on the right.
Right, so, but the one on the right is old, because that's the 3 units.
That's correct, but what happened is, if you look at that second building, they took the unit to the far right.
I
Eliminated-
understand, but I think the
That's correct.
intention was.
So you took that one building out of the ARE 6 zone.
Right, and I think really what we had intended was to eliminate that whole building in the area. Not just one unit.
I think that was what the board was looking for, but on the applicant's behalf, and it's not really a traffic issue, but there is some, I guess it has to be viable from a business standpoint and financially viable of what is needed to
Well,
support.
in fairness to us, your financial
sorry?
viability is irrelevant, and I was never really suggesting the removal of the building because of traffic issues. I'm suggesting that you still do have proposed development. If that building was eliminated in its entirety, you still have part of the front building in that ARE 6 zone, but it would be a much smaller encroachment than it is currently. So that was kind of the intention, was not really to just eliminate one unit, but that whole 3-unit building. That was my recommendation. You know, and then, I mean, if this was the only development that was proposed, that would be one thing, but, you know, as you go back east into the site, you know, there are 2 significantly sized buildings in the back. So, you know, it is a use variance. You still have to get through, you know, whether or not this is something that is going to be looked on favorably by the board.
Right, so from Frank's point of view, his traffic testimony is finished. Jennifer, Christine will have to talk about the justification for the variance when she comes up. But, so maybe we could open up to Frank for questions on the traffic testimony for now.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just jump in, I have a couple more questions just for Frank real quick before we go to the board members. So I think, Frank, you stated that ITE for this site, you know, they say 90% of the truck traffic occurs during the 12-hour period that you did your study. So
Right.
we're talking about, you know, for 42 trucks on a daily basis, 10% of that, you know, maybe 4 to 5 trucks occurs outside of those typical 12 hours, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Are those occurring, you know, overnight? Is it everything ends before 9 p.m.? Do we have any sense from the applicant on that? Hours of operation?
First, the applicant has agreed that there's no operations after 6 p.m. So from this particular site, we're not anticipating any activity at all. That's not to say someone might make a delivery at 5 o'clock and unfortunately it takes a little more than an hour to unload or whatever they're doing. But the intent is there's no activity after 6 p.m. So,
Just to supplement what Frank stated, at the last meeting, we agreed to 9 to 6 for the front buildings. Since that time, the applicant has agreed to stipulate that the entire site would contain the same.
9 a.m. to 6 p.m., Sal?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that originally, Frank, you had said that the front building was 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Is that the whole site?
The whole site.
Okay.
Okay. And then,
but
You can go, Frank.
I was gonna just say, that's what we agreed to, but specifically at the ITE, if you look at specialty trade contractor, that use, there's no truck activity from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. I mean, during the evening hours, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. on the ITE stuff. You look at manufacturing, light industrial type uses, again, I think it's only 1 or 2% during that 12-hour late evening. Where you get a difference is the higher percentage if you have a large warehouse type operation, a distribution type center, then you get that some of that 7% truck activity during the night hours. But we don't have that here. So I still think we're capturing during that 12-hour period almost all the activity from the site, especially when we consider restricting the hours from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Okay, and then obviously you put testimony on the record that there's, from United Foods, a decent amount of truck traffic already existing on Oak Glen Road.
Yeah, go ahead.
Would it be your professional opinion that the geometry at both intersections, north and south, can accommodate, the additional truck traffic and the existing that's already there?
Yes, and let me preface that. When we did the counts at both intersections, it was done by video camera. So I had the pleasure of sitting and looking at the video for that 12-hour period. And basically all the trucks, including the large tractor trailers, were making all the turning movements. So the geometry, in my opinion, can accommodate all those large vehicles.
And then as far as the trucks to and from the site, are any of these anticipated to be parked on the site overnight? Obviously, there's parking spaces on the site, but they're all 9 by 19. Does the applicant anticipate any overnight parking?
I think that was testified at the last meeting. There'd be no overnight parking of trucks.
Okay.
All right. And the question comes up, obviously, someone comes late. Well, if he has deliveries are scheduled. So if they know that he closes at 6 p.m., I don't think they see deliveries coming later in the afternoon. But the intent is not to have anybody parked there during the evening hours after 6 p.m.
Okay, and then I guess this is for you and then also for Si. I believe that the engineer had agreed that they would curb the entire site and provide an 8-foot shoulder along the frontage. I believe the board granted a waiver of the sidewalk along the frontage, as long as the applicant agreed to make contribution to the sidewalk trust fund. So that's all good.
I don't recall, so I don't think I can answer that.
Yes, that's correct. It would be dealt with in more detail at
Site plan, okay. And just the one caveat that I just say, obviously when we get to site plan, we'll want the triangles and everything like that at the driveway. But that can be deferred to the site plan approval. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay. While we're on traffic, the Fire Bureau has some issues, especially with the rear area. There's no turnaround. The 30-foot minimum width. Fire hydrant placement or apparatus placement, and then also about the rear buildings or the buildings being sprinklered.
Well, I'm not really the person to answer that question or address that.
But as far as traffic, as far as the movements on there, that's not you?
Well, I don't have that review letter in front of me, but we're still only here for the use. It's something that will have to be looked at in more detail at site plan stage.
Okay.
Use is approved.
Okay.
I would have the concept plan prepared is that there is a loading area at the far end of the building to the far east or right that's 80 feet deep in length. Plus you have the 30-foot cartway. That, I think, would allow some possibility or activity for a K-turn maneuver of the truck, not necessarily a cul-de-sac. But there appears to be enough room that allows them to at least make that K-turn movement after an event. But that would have to be detailed at site plan stage with the turning movements.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to piggyback on that, if the applicant does go ahead and eliminate some of the units on the front building, certainly their site driveway to the west of the rear basin could be shifted, and certainly that basin and those 3 units and all the associated parking and loading zones could be shifted westerly if needed to provide additional turnaround. Would you agree with that, Mike?
I think there is flexibility depending on what the final outcome is on the buildings. I mean, there is a circulation around the 2 front buildings as shown on that plan. We show a long white driveway along the others, and we show 3 loading areas, like I say, are 80 deep that allows 8. But again, here we're looking at concepts of what worked. And I looked at it from a traffic impacts off-site with that full development. Sure, there's some, they're not really at engineering yet on the site. But something I think that could be looked at. We have to address the fire marshal's concern at site plan. I don't know if that addresses the question.
Yes. Mr. Alfieri,
That's all we have of the traffic witness there. I didn't know if you had other questions of him.
yeah, I'm gonna open it to Stephen.
1 second.
Ms. Dean?
Wait, come on, Rookie. We're close.
I have no traffic questions.
Okay. Mr. Hughes?
Just give me a second to unmute everybody.
I'm listening to a hearing. So,
No, sir, I have no questions at this time.
Okay, Mr. Roscoe?
Hang on. Okay.
Mr. Roscoe, do you have any questions?
Can we get after client and mute themselves? You know who that is?
Jose, do you have any questions?
Yep.
Jose, can you hear us?
Yes.
Do you have any questions?
Do you have any questions?
No, I said no.
Okay. Mr. Merton?
No questions.
Mr. Moretti?
No, sir. No questions.
Mr. Cantor?
One for you, Mr. Chairman. There was a question about what we're voting on. What specifically are we addressing with this particular piece of area?
This is just a use. They still would have to come back for site plan and, at that time for final site plan. This is just strictly for the use of the property.
The use of the property for the warehousing that they're saying. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mr. Saya,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
do you have any questions?
I've been with bated breath here, listening to what Jennifer had put on the record. And of course, I'm one who likes to maintain the master plan when it comes to the ARE6 zone. One of the things that we're not addressing is the fact that, there's the septic and the 3 septics that are being proposed, where if we reduce and get out of the ARE6, maybe we reduce the amount of septic and maintain the pristine of the ARE6 to begin with. Hence, you can fix the traffic patterns, maybe answer the fire department and the circulation and everything else to go along with it. So I have some reservations is what I'm telling you, sir.
I have to agree with you, Paul. Anybody else have any questions? Seeing none. Mr. Tropoli, we're coming up on 10:48 right now. Mr. Alfieri, how long do you think this phone is going to be?
Fast. Super fast. I did half my testimony last month, more than half.
Mr. Chair, I think that, it's impossible to talk to clients, in this format, but, we would like to get Ms. Cafone's testimony on, hear your questions, and then come back at another meeting to try and address any of the issues that are raised.
I think that's a very good plan, Mr. Alfieri, Mr. Chairman. I hear Jennifer, I reviewed my notes and actually the prior proceeding, and I have a concern that her concerns have not been met. And I think, Mr. Alfieri, to give you that opportunity to come back would clear up a great deal of the questions that I think I have in my mind. And again, I think Jennifer needs to be satisfied, and I'm not hearing that at this point. So if we, and again, I don't know how, Jen, do you think that Christine can complete her testimony tonight with Sal coming back to address your outstanding concerns?
I do think she can finish. I think that whether that building is removed or not, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to speak for her, but I don't necessarily think that those two units, are going to change the crux of her testimony. I think it was important to wait until now because of the information that Frank Miskovich put on the record with respect to the traffic, but the removal of that or a reconfiguration, I don't think will change her testimony on the use overall.
Okay. All right. Now, Sal, are you prepared then to finish up for at least tonight, without having a vote, Mr. Chair? Obviously, Sal needs to confer offline with his client and come back hopefully at the next meeting to present the findings. So, Sal, with that, would you like to just bring Christine up and we'll complete that part of the testimony for this evening?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Christine, you were sworn in at the last meeting. You remain under oath.
Yes, I was, thank you, and I acknowledge that I am still under oath.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening, Chairman and members of the board. For the record, Christine Nazaro-Cafone. Last time when we were together back in February, I had an opportunity to testify on the site, so I talked about the fact that it's split zoned, it has some challenges. We have our access, as you know, through the SED. The northern portion is in the ARE6 zone. We talked about how the lot is 1,600 feet deep and it only has about 200 feet of frontage on Oak Glen. We talked about the positive criteria, being that this is adjacent to industrial uses, so this is an appropriate use. So really my point of coming back tonight was talking about the negative criteria and the impact on the zone plan, and particularly the impact on the public good is what the board was concerned about from a traffic point of view. If you introduce an industrial type use onto this property, would there be any kind of detriment or degradation to the surrounding road area? So Mr. Miskovich went out, he studied the area, he looked at this, and what he came back, and I think the crux of his testimony can be summarized in that he found no detriment or no degradation of the change in the traffic patterns in the build scenario. So, and he did that testimony, and he did that analysis, I should say, predicated on the square footage that we were proposing. Now, I know we came to you with a proffer tonight to reduce the two front buildings each, and that would eliminate 6,000 additional square feet. From what I heard tonight, and I listened to all the colloquy back and forth, what we tried to do was we tried to get the lion's share of the building out of the AR6 zone. So that would be really the second building that we're proposing on the site. Certainly, I can appreciate, particularly I think it was Chairman Manson's concern, that he thought we were going to push back a little bit more off of Oak Glen and perhaps give a better visual or curb appeal off of the road. And what that would do is, though, it would keep more building area in the ARE6.
personally, I think that's one of those balancing issues. This is not a site plan, so we're coming back for site plan approval regardless of if we had more building in the ARA 6 or more closer to Oak Glen, we're definitely coming back. But when we consider that the fact that the ARE 6 zone and the master plan, and I read the master plan, and the ARE 6 zone talks about preservation of the rural character. And I think that there are a lot of sites in the ARE 6 zone where this particular use wouldn't be appropriate. And a lot of roads with this particular use wouldn't be appropriate. But here on Oak Glen Road and here on this site where we are contiguous to similar type uses, I don't think the board has to be concerned at all that we are obliterating the purpose or intent of the ARE 6 zone. And also, I did read your master plan, and I do think it's important that there are some things in there specifically that talk about, you know, the need to recognize and adapt to the changing dynamics of the demands in a diverse and increasing globalized economy. And I think that this is not an enormous distribution center, so it creates an opportunity to have warehousing and this type of use for perhaps a smaller scale that our changing and diverse globalized economy is calling for. And your master plan specifically calls for those two. It actually uses the words increased globalized economy. So I think this is one of those type of uses that can support that. This is a really tricky lot. It's the northern part of the property where our detention basin is in the ARE 6, and then the ARE 6 zone takes a jog in the back of the first building, and then almost the entirety of that second 18,000 square foot building, the previously 18,000 square foot building, now 12,000 as we're currently proposing, is in the ARE 6 zone. I personally do not think that that is a problem to have that building in the ARE 6 zone. I think I'm sort of leaning more towards Mr. Nanson's idea of perhaps maybe shifting the buildings back, and then that way it gives you more of a buffer. I think it would be a greater visual impact to increase that buffer. So if we kept our two buildings that we proposed, shaving them each by about 3,000 square feet, and perhaps taking the opportunity to shift them back, I think that that would perhaps be the best balancing act for this site. It takes advantage of a long, like I said, this is a 1,600 linear foot site with only 200 feet of frontage. So I really do think that this use is particularly suited and really ideally suited for this type of warehousing use. We've made a lot of suggestions to the board to help with the negative criteria by making the 50-foot buffer setback, by limiting the hours. So I think the application, and we heard you last month, you asked us to reduce the size of the building. We came with a 6,000 square foot reduction, which I think is not insignificant. And I think we've gotten the plan, in my opinion, to a part that really balances the concerns of the board. We've addressed your concerns on traffic. You've heard the testimony from Mr. Miskovich that we're not going to have a negative traffic impact. So I think that that really helps us on the negative criteria, and the fact that there is no substantial detriment. Again, the land use law does not ask you to hold us or any other applicant to such a standard that there be absolutely no detriment, just that the benefits outweigh the detriments. And here, when you balance the goals of the master plan, and then you look at the character of the area and what's actually out there on Oak Glen, realize that this particular property, if developed in this way, is not going to negatively impact those goals of the ARE 6 zone, simply given the character of the area, what's around it. And again, this is a very small portion of the lot is in the ARE 6. The lion's share of it is in the SED zone. So I can confidently tell you from a planning point of view that I believe we meet our statutory burden of proof for the grant of this use variance. I think the site is particularly suitable and uniquely suitable for this proposed warehouse use. I think we substantiate our proof with respect to the positive criteria, and that with the improvements to the plan, the reduction of the building, the willingness of the applicant to shift away from Oak Glen and give you a little bit more of a curb appeal look and perhaps a little more green space, along Oak Glen, that we substantiate the burden of proof with respect to the negative criteria, particularly having no impact on the zone plan, not only having a non-negative impact on your master plan, but taking advantage of some of the goals in your master plan of having, the ability to serve an increased globalized economy. And so I believe we have no substantial detriment to either the public good or the zone plan if the board were to move favorably on this variance.
That's all we have, Mr. Chair.
Jen?
So I don't take exception to the majority of the testimony that's been provided. I would, with the exception of, out of a 72,000 square foot project, 6,000 I don't consider to be significant. When we were talking about those units that were in the ARE 6 zone, which is the 18,000 square feet. So, I would put it to the board. There is a suggestion that, so like my initial intent was to remove the buildings from the ARE 6 zone, since this is such a departure from 6-acre single-family residential. But the suggestion to perhaps, and I'm kind of directing this at you, Sal, is to maybe sharpen your pencils a little bit more than 6,000 square feet, but to perhaps move the buildings farther away from the road could solve some other problems. And I do agree that there's the balancing act. I just think that the way that the project is proposed currently is, in my opinion, pretty intense, especially in the front section of the project. You have the existing building that's still there, and now these 2 new buildings. But that would be a decision that the board would have to make, whether it would be to continue to encourage the applicant to reduce the square footage in the ARE 6 zone, or only, and keep the front building as where it is, proximate to Oak Glen Road, or have them kind of sharpen their pencils, maybe remove a little bit more than 6,000 square feet, and then shift the whole project back to the east. I think that would also eliminate the setback off the buffer, which you're at almost 90 feet now. Moving the building back a little bit more would help that condition as well. So, I would leave that up to you. With respect to what's happening in and around this site, I don't disagree with the testimony that's been provided. I do agree that Oak Glen Road, it can handle additional vehicular traffic, even if there are trucks. I think that the hours of operation, limiting the site to operating only till 6 p.m. will, and the commitment, now Sal, you made a commitment, right? No tractor trailers on the site? Correct?
We did not make that commitment yet. That's still something we're working on.
Okay, so I would strongly encourage you to consider that prior to coming back at a later date. But I think that will alleviate some of the concern. I know that Oak Glen Road handles a significant amount of traffic, but it's still relatively rural in that area of town. So with that being said, I just would recommend maybe taking a harder look at a reduction in the square footage beyond the 6,000. And I would defer to you, Mr. Chair, on whether you would want that just removed from the ARE 6 or pushed away from the road. You prefer it away from the road, correct?
I would prefer it away from the road. And then, speaking of the tractor trailers, there's no way, if I'm a tractor trailer driver, I'm going to pull in to the back section of that property, because you're going to wind up having to back all the way out. So, they're going to have to limit tractor trailers from the back section of the project. And, I think they have ample turn room, especially if they eliminate a building or more square footages, they would be able to move a tractor trailer in there. But that would be the only front section.
I just cracked up when I saw that.
But other than that, I don't disagree with the testimony. I do think it's a unique site. I think the zone line is very unusual. And unfortunately, it doesn't follow the lot line, which is kind of leading to why we're here. So with that being said, I think other than maybe a further reduction in the square footage in the front section of the project, I don't take exception to the testimony provided.
Jen, this is Matt. I just want to give you a little bit of background on the zone line. The previous, or the current owner, I believe still, merged two lots together, which created the lot the way it is now. It did used to follow the lot line, just for the board's knowledge.
Got it.
Okay,
So, yeah, we would like to carry the application to the next available meeting, Eileen. Not
How
sure
is
when it
June 8th?
June 8th.
I have another meeting that night.
Then the next one after that would be July 13th, because June 22nd, I have 3 applications already scheduled.
Oh, so, again, maybe we should carry June 8th, and I'll have to figure out how to handle it. I just don't want my client to have to wait that long because of me.
And it's really this one isolated issue.
Right, exactly.
But before since there's not going to be any other testimony, does any of the board members have any questions or comments to Ms. Capone?
You know, Mr. Chairman, I'll say it.
Yes, sir.
You know, is what's the encroachment, right? And that's causing me some concern. But what about the applicant maybe? What's the height restriction, Jen? Can they go a little higher?
Well, I don't necessarily know that would make a difference. It's not like it's an office building where you're going to take a couple of cubicles or offices and then put them on another story. This is I think the intent, and Sal, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that each of those different units could be rented individually.
That's correct.
So if you take sections off and adding it up that's not really the driving force. It's really the horizontal configuration.
Yeah. But, you know, I'm not a fan of busting the ARE.
I know.
I'm telling you. Okay.
I 100% get it, which is why I had brought this up in the first place when we were at the meeting the last time.
Okay.
Anybody else have a comment or question of Ms. Capone? Yes, sir. Mr. Merton?
No, sir.
Mr. Hughes?
No, sir. Nope.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Not at this time.
Mr. Moretti?
No, sir.
Mr. Roscoe?
Nothing.
Mr. Cantor?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I think I got everybody, right?
I think so.
Okay, so we're gonna move this to June 8th, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, case number BA 1911, K10 Holdings LLC will be carried to June 8th at 7:30 with no further notice. Thank you, Mr. Alfieri.
Everyone, have a good night.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any business from the board?
I don't have any.
Seeing none, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn?
Who was that, Mr. Moretti?
Yes.
And seconded by, who seconded?
I think it was Mr. Orozco.
Mr. Roscoe, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, zoning board of adjustment adjourned at 11:05 p.m.
Good night,
Thank you very much.
I think it went fairly well.
Yes, it did.
Okay, good night, guys.
Good night.
Good night, all. And everyone.